You're listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, the people who play it. Today is October 21st, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing on this fine Monday morning?
Oh, Spencer, hello. I'm doing quite well. Good morning to you. We are doing a special little... It's almost morning drive time. We're a little late for morning drive time on the East Coast, yeah. But whatever. Yeah, it is Monday morning. I've been awake for about 45 minutes, so bear with me as I shake the cobwebs off. But I'm doing well. Been a great week of WoW, and man, we got a huge week coming up with patch looming, so that's very exciting. I think there's all kinds of cool stuff coming with the anniversary event, and everybody's got to be looking forward to something going on with it, right?
Yeah.
First, at the top of the show, we got to mention we are currently running a giveaway, courtesy of our friends on the WoW team, for the Wondrous Wave Whisker mount, which is I believe it was a 12-month or a 6-month gift mount a little while back. It's a giant fish. It's like a carp or like a catfish or something. It's a big magic carp, basically. It's really cool, and we got a few codes to give away. So what we are asking you to do is to come find us on social media and send us a screenshot or a Wowhead wardrobe mock-up, or just tell us your best 20th anniversary mog. Whether that means it's some vanilla jank from back in the day when you couldn't actually mog yourself and stuff just kind of fit together, or something that really speaks to you about a class or a particular point in time in the game. We want to see them. We are a little bit late notice in the show. We had like 4 days to run this giveaway.
Yeah.
So, if this is the first you're hearing of it, I do apologize. We didn't have the info last time we recorded, but we're going to do the giveaway tomorrow, patch day in NA. And so come find us on Twitter at the Starting Zone. And we also set up a page over on Blue Sky, which is over at the starting zone .bsky.social. So come find one of those two accounts. Let us see those old school mogs, or whatever you just think is the mog that speaks to you the most for 20 years. And we'd love to see them, and we'll sift through the entrants and we'll let the winners know very soon, and then you can have a magical carp of your very own. And thanks, Warcraft, for those.
I will say, actually, one of my favorite mogs that I would highlight and post inside the situation was way back in the day. My mage during Burning Crusade got the Aldor's Regalia tier 4, and it was one of the first tier sets that just had like a collar as opposed to having a helm that covered up your whole character's head. And it was really nice to be able to be geared. You don't have to take anything off because there's no transmog back then, and have your character be visible as to who they were, and what the effort you put into like customizing their face was actually a really nice feature. And I just loved the coloration, the floating shoulder pads that moved, and like there was some really cool stuff about them that I was pretty pumped about. So that was definitely cool and worthwhile to me to be sure I picked up. So yeah, that would be the one that I would use to post. So yeah.
If I was going to enter something like this, I would probably find some like vanilla grays or whatever and just transmog into the most 2004 jank I could possibly find. Fair. We're not really going to pick the winners based on any kind of merits. It's all for fun. You know what I mean? It's not like there's some cheat code to like winning. We're going to pick winners at random, and then those people can enjoy their mounts for having some fun with us. But it would just amuse me, like when I think of 20 years of WoW, I kind of think of those early days and just you equipped whatever you found, in a lot of cases that was just like a white or a gray that dropped off of something you killed because maybe you couldn't even finish a quest, right? So, you just kind of went with whatever you had. And that's what I think of for 20 years and for sort of the transmog piece, like the visual appearance of our characters. So I would do something like that and just kind of make it silly.
Fair. Yeah, absolutely. There's no wrong answer in that. All right, let's talk a little bit about what we got up to this past week in World of Warcraft. Past week for me, obviously, I have raided one night of this past week. Tonight is the second night. The one raid that we had yesterday, we started about an hour early and just cleared through heroic with, we had a gold buyer. someone who was in there saying, hey, I'm willing to pay 400K to pop in and get the heroic clear on everything. So we went, great, sure, we can do that. So we started a bit early to get that in, which was nice. And I still stand by, and this is how, Mythic teams afford all the stuff that they need to afford, but I still stand by the RP of this, of having a wealthy debutante or whatever saying, hey, I'm going to pay a team of adventurers to escort me through this dungeon space so I can collect all these treasures that are along the way. I still enjoy that aspect of this and think it's kind of neat. I'm glad it is less of a public and public facing industry than it was back in BFA. In BFA, there was multiple discords and like all sorts of stuff, and there are still some of those around. They just are less prominent in the community WoW space. So it's nice to be back to like, yeah, this was like the sister of a guildmate, and they were willing to do this with gold for the team to help the team out, but also to get themselves some gear. And you're like, great, that works out really well. And so that was kind of neat. So we started a bit early, cleared all through Heroic, hopped into Mythic, cleared up to Ovanax in Mythic, which was really nice. And then we actually had an hour and a half left to work on Ovanax. So in an hour and a half, we cleared Heroic and the first 4 bosses of Mythic, which felt really good. And then that last hour and a half was working on Ovanax. We got Ovanax to the point where like could die any pull, which feels really good as well. So tonight hopefully is Ovanax down and we can move on to the next boss. So that'll be the next bit of prog to move into. But I do think that the 2.25% or whatever it is buff did help a bit. I mean, you could definitely feel the damage difference. Most of our raid team didn't have it until we'd finished our heroic clear because most people hadn't raided earlier in the week. A lot of that for me myself came down to I didn't trust that the system was going to work properly if I raided on an alt, and I didn't want to get anything saved or anything happening on my main because we weren't sure what was happening with wanting to be sure we got loot distributed for heroic. So it was one of those like, this is kind of awkward. Like, I'm just going to not raid on any character until we hit that last day because I want to be sure I've like gotten firsthand experience of someone transferring tokens around and getting the buff properly and everything worked properly before I like risked doing a raid on a different character and not having that happen. So we'll cover exactly how that works later on. There's a segment of the show where we're going to talk about the UI being glitched for that buff. And we'll cover exactly how that buff works for everyone at that segment for people. But yeah, it's one of those things where that held up some of my raid progression a little bit through the week. So I've a bit of catch up to do today or tomorrow. If I want to like run LFR or normal or something on an alt, I'll need to try and find something kicking around during the day today or at some point like that. But yeah, so raid was really good. I was very happy with it. I still feel like Ovanax is a massively unnecessarily add-on intensive boss that Blizzard needs to put work into the UI to help resolve, or at least how they design mechanics to help resolve, because it still feels weird spending like 20 minutes at the top of that boss because you're bringing in someone who hasn't seen the boss before and you have to like wait for them to set up their add-ons and walk them through how they have to set up their weak auras and what things they have to turn off inside this other add-on and make sure that there isn't like a bad overlap happening between someone marking and someone not marking. Oh, who has assist? Is this person? Okay, that person, let's remove assist from them and see if that fixes the problem. That we're like, that stuff to me is like, oh God, it's brutal.
Yeah, and then you're talking about a boss that is still a giant brick wall for most teams out there right now, even after all that other sort of third-party support for helping you do the fight. So yeah, that is kind of rough, but it sounds like you guys are mostly over the hump with it, so that's awesome. And for our part, I agree. Like, even though the 2.25% looks like a minuscule number, it was definitely noticeable once we had that stacked up. What we ended up doing was doing 1, 2, 7, 8 normal, which people are starting to grumble about, but what I did was I brought my druid. I played Guardian for the first 2 bosses just to lock that Toon's ID there so we can stop doing those and just save, half an hour or whatever every week. The gear from the last 2 bosses is really good, even if you have it champ track, like the Spy Master's Trinket or the Poison Ring. They're just incredible items, and so having extra chances at them is really a boon to our team, even if some people don't need it or whatever. Also, you get the Omni tokens, and when you bring 30 to Ansarek, you get like 3 of them or whatever. So I've had some people switch tunes around or whatever, or just been really unlucky with collecting set bonuses. So I think there's still some benefits for doing the last 2.
So I want to clarify one thing because you mentioned it in there. You get 3 tokens guaranteed at 30, but you have a chance to get 3 tokens from 20 and above. So if you're from 21 and above, the chance just increases with the more people you have inside your raid group. So you can, and we were fortunate enough in the first couple of weeks of raiding to have this happen, where we had 24 or 25 people, and we got 3 tokens. The first 2 times we killed her on heroic, and that was very lucky to have that happen. So it was just one of those, like, if you are noticing with your team when you're killing her on normal or heroic, whatever it is, when you're sometimes gain 3, sometimes gain 2, it's probably because you're in that, like, you have a chance realm of getting loot in that situation.
Right. Yeah, it's like a graduating percentage chance for that extra item as your group size increases. So. Yeah, which is great when you hit it for sure. So yeah, I just want to make sure that we're getting those extra tokens out and everything like that. Plus, you get the Nerubian finery for the buff from each unique boss, like boss with a different name that you kill that week. And so I still have quite a few people that need AOTC kills and stuff like that. So getting the buff stacked up before we do our big target boss helps a lot, it's going to, like, maybe this week it won't because we're not going to get a stack of the buff this week, but over time it's really going to add up. So that was fine. And then actually we got all the way back through Silken Court and had a couple pulls on Ansarek on Tuesday night with the large group, which was really cool. Like, we're almost getting to the point where we can do like 10 bosses in one night. I mean, well, actually I guess that would have been 12 bosses in one night, because we did do the first 2 on normal. So, we're getting close to that, like, one night clear with the extras, but it wasn't quite in the cards. We had like one decent pull Tuesday. Wednesday I brought back 30 or 29. It was a very full group, and man, like we're doing okay, but once again, just getting basically nowhere, I think one thing is that when we have the full group, a lot of people on my team are complaining about performance drops on Ansarek. And, positioning is really touch and go on that fight. Like, if your client and the server disagree about where your character is, there's a very real chance that you're just going to die or create some kind of raid wipe. Yeah. And if a significant amount of the raid is having performance hits with 30 players, then what are my options? Yeah. So, we had one near kill with like 29 or 30 in the group, and then it just kind of regressed to a bunch of phase 1 wipes, and I'm lagging, and I had a lag spike there, or I had a really bad frame drop. Yeah. And just people dying to environmental stuff. So I said, all right, we're gonna cut it back down. And we eventually, we just didn't have time on Tuesday. So we came back Wednesday. I started with the full group again because I have a responsibility. Like I still have 30 some players in my rating orbit who want to get in for raids. They want kills. They want ahead of the curve. They want all that stuff. So, my job as the leader of the team is to get as many people through as I can. And, man, it was like even worse when we came back on Wednesday with the full group. It was just like consistent phase 1 wipes. And I said, all right, like, I hate to do it, but we gotta cut the group down. And again, people were just many complaints about performance hits and everything, in terms of the game actually just not functioning properly, which makes it a bit of an easier choice. So cut the group down, and once I cut it to 22, we just one-shot it. It just fell over. Yeah. Which was nice, because I did get 4 or 5 or 6 new AOTCs, so I did cycle a bunch of new people through for the kill, which was great. Had the rest of the night to work on Mythic. It was our first night looking in there. So start up on Olgrax. Obviously, you don't really have a choice, but it felt okay. There's a little adjustment period of like, carnivorous contest is a lot more dangerous, right? You get pulled a lot faster. Yep. So, Wednesday we had a couple pulls. We got like through 1 or 2 rotations. I'm like, okay, this is all right. Sunday, the plan was to come back to it, and I had the group set up. I did my group comps really late because I'm getting fewer and fewer signups. So if I only have to move around 2 spots or whatever, then I don't feel the urgency. Plus, like, ZTH isn't doing as many of the giant like open community runs. They actually started an entirely new team off the community runs they were doing, which is awesome, but it also means there's less like open raids going on. So I put the comp together and I put it out there, and then during the day, Sunday, it was just like healer after healer was like, I can't come. Something came up. I'm out, whatever. So I just told the team like, okay, well, we're going to do alt night, you know, and if you want to play alts, just log on and we'll do something. And then it was more healers saying I was down like 3 or 4 healers, you know, from the 5 or 6 total that I've been running and that I have available right now. So I was like, all right, well, we'll see what happens. At this point, I'm thinking I'm going to log on and just do keys for a couple hours. And then I log on, a bunch of people were online and they're like hitting me up for raid invites. And I was like, all right, well, let's see what we got. So I just started inviting people that were online. And then a couple of our really good DPS like switched to heal spec. And I'm like, do you guys actually have healing setups? And they were both like, yeah. So I said, all right, well, let's give it a shot. And so I grabbed some other DPS who like maybe weren't our best or like maybe people I wouldn't have in for Mythic Prog, but like, let's give it a shot. We need reps. We need to just look at fights. So whatever, let's go do it.
It's a chance at working towards that vault too, which is nice.
Yeah. So, you know, I figured whatever, like, let's go see what happens. And man, it was tough sledding at first. I mean, I had some pretty low throughput in there. I'm not going to lie. I was down quite a few of my pumpers, and a couple of my pumpers were on healers that they didn't really have a lot of experience healing on in this raid. So it was kind of a wild time. The first like 45 minutes, I was just like, this is going nowhere. Like we're having 2, 3, 4 people die every phase 1. We're having another 3 or 4 people die from the charge attack in the intermission phase. I told leadership, like, I'm calling this at 9. Like I'll hang in there, but like I got to call it early because I just can't keep doing this. And then we started to have some breakthroughs. You know, I started really trying to direct traffic a bit more. People got a lot better about the dance for carnivorous contest, which is the web poll. Yeah. And so we started getting through phase 1 a lot cleaner. You know, I think sometimes people get in this zone of like, I have to do as much damage as possible. And like, you're not, which you do to an extent, but you're not going to kill like a progression boss before its mechanics happen. Like you're not going to skip the boss. So you gotta do what the boss asks you to do. So eventually we started dialing in that phase 1 a lot cleaner. People were positioning better, working together better to clear up the webs so that the pole had like a lane to go through. And then I really started directing traffic in the intermissions. I was like, we're going to all go over to the opposite side of the room from where the eggs spawn. I mean, this is a tip that you discussed in the show a couple weeks ago. Yeah. But like people were sort of jumping on the ads and hanging out center field, like just dead center on the platform and shooting stuff and whatever. And then catching charges because they couldn't judge the angle or whatever. Yeah. So I started putting like a ground marker down and I'm jumping around with a charm over my head. Like, come over here. Everybody just come back. Because when you're at the edge, when you're at the edge, it's way easier to judge the angle on that charge, and the angle's so cut down, like it can only go so far from the edge, so you can get out of it a lot easier. Then all the ads die right near the boss. You feed the boss quick. So we started doing that, and once people dialed in that phase 2 positioning, we started having some pretty good polls, and somehow we ended up killing it by 9 o'clock anyway. So I did call it at 9 because we killed it. So it was like, okay, I'm not going to start a new boss with half an hour left in the week. And especially with a group that was like janky at best. Like it was great that people were willing to fill in, play off roles. People were willing to come in with no notice basically and just work on Mythic Prog. Like great performance by the team, and it was really fun. So yeah, that was cool. We definitely made the most of a bad situation. I mean, like life happens, right? But it puts a weird strain on the team when life happens to like 4 of your healers all on the same day. So, you know, whatever. But yeah, awesome week of raiding, and I think this week is going to be even better because we're not going to waste that time on normal 1 and 2. You know, we'll just get right into the good stuff right away, and we should have plenty of time for more Mythic fights this week. I think Olgrax will be an easier clear as we go along. People get more time. You know, now we have a bunch of people with a good number of pulls on it, and they know what to do. We'll bring in, you know, some of our higher performers probably next week, which will mean that the fight won't even last as long. So yeah, it's going to be good. And I guess this week we don't get a stack of the buff, but you know, it's still, I think even though it seems like a small number, considering it's everybody in the raid, it's like the entire zone. Even one stack felt you could feel the impact of it, and I think as it stacks up, it's going to be like, man, we're just plowing through this raid, and that's going to be really fun.
Yeah,
we're in that mode now where it's like we want to just smash heroic and have fun, and mythic will get what we get, right? But the buff will help us maybe see stuff we wouldn't see otherwise. So it's going to be really cool. I think
that's what I'm excited about with this whole thing. I'm excited about what the raid's going to feel like in a month from now when we have, essentially 7% or so increased damage and healing happening across your whole raid. You're going to feel that in such a dramatic way that you will see bosses where there's phases where you're barely making it and you're not quite able to do it. Great example, you're about to go up against Bloodbound Horror on Mythic. That's the next boss on your list. That boss has an ad phase where you have to deal with ads, and that is a limited window of time to deal with these ads. And whether or not you have the damage or not is that entire fight for dealing with those ads. And it's not a massive, crazy requirement, but it certainly will get easier as that percentage happens. And the faster you can get rid of them, the more time people have to recover, deal with the beam that's rotating, actually put damage into the boss, like all those sorts of things then happen, which I think is really important. Because the thing with Bloodbound Horror on Mythic that gets a lot of teams is there's one Harbinger ad in the downstairs phase that spawns in a farther location away from the rest of the group of ads. And the Harbinger ad's a big deal because it spawns little walkie dudes that wander into the boss and put a shield on the boss, and so you want to stop that from happening. So we basically had to make a hit squad that was like, all right, we're taking, myself, a boomkin, and a hunter. They're going to always kill the farthest right ad, whatever ad that is, or the farthest away ad, or whatever way you want to do it, which meant that there is the second time we go down where the ad is literally on the opposite side of the arena from where you get slammed to go down. And so the two of us, bolt around the whole arena side, not overlapping with our friends upstairs, because that will also wipe the raid, and then just lay all of our cooldowns. Just hold all of our cooldowns and lay all of our cooldowns into that ad and kill that ad and kill it off, while the rest of our group kills off the other 3 ads that are back over where we initially went down. And that is like a critical aspect of getting that fight down cleanly, because you either have to have a group that is fast enough on damage with that first pack of ads that they can move around the whole arena and then catch that other ad on its own and kill it and kill the ones that have already started wandering towards the boss, or you do the hit squad thing between the two of them. So yeah, it's the DPS increase and the healing increase will definitely help. There's a lot of healing absorbs in this raid too. Bloodbound Horror has a healing absorb, Ovanax has a healing absorb, where it doesn't look like you're in danger. You're at 80% health. You seem like you're in pretty good shape. And then you get hit and you drop to 20% and you use a health stone and nothing happens. And you use a health pot and nothing happens. And you use a survivability ability and nothing happens. Well, because you have a 5 million healing absorb shield on you that needs to get healed off, and your healers need to be paying attention to those things. So it looks like you're good, but if you aren't tracking healing absorbs, that's another big problem. So you got to be sure you're paying attention to those things too with these fights. The other thing you mentioned in your raid talk that I wanted to talk about a little bit was Queen Ansarek and performance issues. That is a consistently big thing that a lot of teams are currently dealing with, and it is definitely worth looking at. It's not as bad as Sylvanas. Sylvanas was the worst fight ever for performance issues. You pulled that fight and couldn't do anything for 8 to 10 seconds. It was weird, and in those 8 to 10 seconds, she would do little spiral circles that would go out and could just one-shot you if they hit you the wrong way. So you had a lot of wipes on that fight in the first 10 to 15 seconds just because someone's frames went to 0 and they lost all their damage because they used all their cooldowns there, and they stood in something and died, and it's all because they couldn't see what was happening in the game. So Queen Ansarek definitely has a few moments where people can have performance issues. I think the biggest thing is being sure that the weak auras and stuff you're using aren't affecting your performance issues. So no models. If you do a search for model inside of your weak auras, be sure that you are getting rid of those or changing it from being a model. Because right now there's a consistent issue with performance with asking the WoW engine to render models from weak auras. So that's something you can fix. The other huge thing you can do to increase performance in raiding is go into your details and turn down the update rate all the way to 3 seconds, so that thing only updates every 3 seconds, because it will grab information from your combat log from everyone in the raid every 0.5 seconds or 0.2 seconds if you have it set low enough. And the moment you take that and just like drag it out to 3 seconds, so every 3 seconds it grabs everything and updates and shows you what's happening with the detail stuff. Don't worry, everything's still recorded through the fight. It just only updates every 3 seconds. That to me was a big performance increase for a lot of people. So I would certainly say go into your details, set the update rate in settings to a much slower update, and you will see a large performance increase if people are struggling on that fight in particular. So just little things you can do to sort of help your computer handle things.
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff gets, especially like the details thing, is so much worse as the group size increases, right? Because it's just more, it's just so much more data. So, yeah, that's just kind of the way that works. But yeah, I think even with that stuff, you know, being adjusted to as favorably as possible, there's something about Ansarek that just makes people's clients chug super hard. You know, especially, well, I don't know. I want to say especially in phase 1, but that's usually by that time we have to just call a wipe because there's enough performance issues that there's no reason to, you know, they've now cost us deaths and there's no reason to continue. Yeah,
it's definitely unforgiving. The other thing I got up to this past week was I went and did the Kazalgar Safari because a listener of ours posted inside of our patron Discord, which I was very grateful for. The pet that I was asking for last week was from Kazalgar Safari. So if you actually look at the Kazalgar Safari, you do not see what the reward is. That it's not on the actual achievement for completing it. But if you do a search inside of your pet frame, you will find Waxwick, which is the pet that you actually get as a reward for completing this. And Waxwick is the little candle dude that comes out from Candle Confidant. And so I was able to have him along with my other Candle Confidants for the raid, which was a lot of fun. And I could even use the biscuits to make him huge. So he looks like, I can't remember what the actual name of the really large dude is that comes out of your Candle Confidant. But it was fun to have this large candle guy chilling with me all the time. So that was a lot of fun. That took me like 2 hours or so to sort of do the Kazalgar Safari. Now I have a lot of pets at 25 and I've put a lot of effort into pet battling over the years. I still have I have an add-on that I picked up a while back that lets me actually build teams and organize them based off of who I'm fighting. And I still have stuff back to Pandaria inside of that. So nice. I've had it for a long time, and that's been an add-on that I really enjoyed. So I can throw that in the show notes, or I can answer inside Discord if people have questions about which one that is, or on Twitter, whatever it is. But yeah, it's certainly worthwhile doing that. There's a lot of pet battle websites out there that can help you find the best combinations for fighting things as well. So it's certainly worth investing some time. But yes, I wanted to get my little pet. So I managed to get him and put the effort into getting him this week, make sure that happened. On Tuesday this week, since we'll talk about Mythic Plus, I basically got done my Mythic Pluses for the week. I did 8 Mythic Plus dungeons on Tuesday, which was crazy. I did 7 or 6 11s. I did 6 11s and then 2 10s, which was also crazy. So I got myself some more portals that I hadn't been doing because we just hadn't been timing those keys. It's always weird to look at like Blizzard's UI interface for how they handle Mythic Plus because they handle the one completed in the shortest period of time. So like I could complete an 11 in time, but I completed a 5 the fastest. And so that shows up as my thing when my best run is a 5. I don't really... Over it.
Yeah, it's so weird thing right now.
Yeah. So that to me needs some adjustment, but it was really nice to get through those keystones and get that done. And I will say we're going to talk a bit about the affix once we get into what's going on this week, this past week's affix. But yeah, there's definitely some difference in difficulty with this one. And something that I know you mentioned in show notes was this is an affix that is by far the hardest one to avoid the enemies getting a version of, a copy of. Mm-hmm. And it's because not only do they come in from every direction the majority of the time, you're dealing with needing like room denial mechanics in most situations. So they'll come in from a direction where you can't actually get it. If it's like second boss of, Grim Batol, and one's coming across the lava room and then comes over top of the ledge into a pool of lava that has been placed from a slam or something else, the only way to get it is for someone to dive into the lava to try and get an orb to stop him from getting it, or try to drag him away from that edge as much as you can, but the boss doesn't like to move very much. So there's tricky things like that. There's other bosses that don't move. which also create an issue. So there's, I don't know, it's the weirdest one to try and ensure the boss or no minion gets a version of, because that's the other thing that happens is we've definitely had bosses that spawn ads, and then basically an ad is spawned like just in front of an orb, or the orb spawn on top of the ads. We had that with first boss of Arakara, where the ads come out of eggs from across the room and wander. And they were wandering, and then the orbs spawned, and they spawned on top of the ads, and then 2 ads just got orbs right away. And you're like, now the boss has 2 stacks of orbs because 2 ads happened to get, like, it was like, okay. So that type of stuff can happen, and I would say it's not as much fun a mechanic as some of the other ones are out there. So we'll chat about that a bit more, but yeah, it's a weird one.
Yeah, I think it is. It's kind of just the most disruptive. It requires so much movement and coordination. It's as complex as like any boss mechanic, any individual boss mechanic in the dungeon pool, and it happens all the time in all situations.
Except if it was designed for a boss, there'd only be 5 orbs.
Right? Yeah, or something, or the spacing would be farther apart. I mean, like the third boss in City of Threats actually has like a very similar mechanic.
Yes,
but yeah. I mean, it just makes you do things that you don't want to do. Which I get that like. The affixes are supposed to make the dungeons harder. How many times have I said that on the show, right? Yeah. And that's fine. I actually I had a fine week. It's just it doesn't feel fun to play against. I'm actually done with 10s for the week as we speak.
Nice.
And I've been doing Mondays. Like I've been doing 3-4 dungeons on Mondays with a group of pumpers that we could push some keys up. So probably taking the night off from that tonight unless anybody really wants to do stuff. And yeah, basically what I was doing this week was I did get into some 11s. First time doing 11s was this week. Didn't time any 11s, but they didn't feel horrible. But it was obviously quite a bit harder. But the advantage was I don't want to do 8s. I don't want to do 9s. I want to do 10s and 11s.
Yep.
Hell, I'll do 12s, whatever. I want vault credit and I want gilded crests.
Right.
And we're in a spot kind of a couple nights this week, like off night Thursday. I think we've been doing some keys, and I had 80% of like a really confident push squad, but we had to tag somebody in a DPS or whatever. And the way that this dungeon pool is, if you don't execute the bosses, you don't time dungeons. You can't afford a boss wipe because with the 15-second penalty per death and how tight the timers are, like, a wipe means you brick that key. If you're doing a 10, it has tyrannical.
Yeah. So clarify one thing, which is there are more forgiving keys. There are keys where you can wipe once and be okay on a boss and still complete. You can have 6 to 8 deaths on some dungeons with the 15-second penalty and still complete it. However, there are dungeons where you can have 1 death and not time it.
That's true.
Like it is that imbalanced.
I've had both of those experiences so far this season. But yeah, so the other night, we had some 10s we had pushed up, but we were missing like one of our core DPS, but I had people who I knew were like capable players who were available and wanted to do keys, and then they get 10 completion per vault or whatever. Like, let's just do the 11 because if we brick it, then we just have another 10 to do. I'd rather do that than potentially brick a 10 than have to do a 9 that nobody really wants to do.
Right.
So, we twisted some 11s into some 10s. I did do some 9s for the week, but I did enough dungeons at this point to push them off of my vault table. So, I mean, like, it's funny. Like, Arakara was a dungeon. We did a couple Arakaras last night because we just had the keys. And that is a dungeon that I think interacts terribly with this affix because boss 1, you spawn ads and you have a ton of area denial. Boss 2, you spawn an ad once in a while and you have just a massive amount of area denial.
Yeah, the entire phase where he's inside of a circle that's safe and you can't step out of it. Yeah.
I did experiment on the first time we did it with like, I'm going to pop cooldowns and run out into the bad and soak orbs. That wasn't the play. Yep. Don't do that, okay? Yep. Tell my story. Yep. And then, obviously third boss is just this complete disaster of stuff all over the room. They changed the logic on the crystals for this week where they will try to go towards players if there's no enemies in range, which is great, which makes weird stuff happen because there's times where like a boss will phase out or something or it ends up being sort of unaddressable by the crystals, and then they'll start moving around. But so like on last boss in Arakara, they'll start moving towards the blood workers and the black blood ads and stuff, and like they're just all over the room. So, but the moral of the story is we plus 2'd both of those 10 keys. So, it felt weird. It's like this a psychological test. Like 10% damage sounds really bad for 20 seconds, and it definitely can be. But, on a boss fight like that, the enemy's getting an orb or two, or even maybe a couple, a few orbs, is you can probably survive that versus like badly overreacting to the crystals and then causing immediate deaths because of standing in bad or whatever. It's just it's this weird cognitive dissonance, right? It's like we're doing the affix not perfectly over and over and over again all dungeon, and yet we finish it with 7 minutes on the timer, right? Like we didn't have a bad run at all. We had a great run, but it didn't feel good because it felt like we kept failing that mechanic because bosses kept getting buffed.
Right.
So, and now maybe that's a thing that just, we got to internalize that. And the next time it comes around, we just know like, okay, our goal here is to get more orbs than the boss. And then we feel good, get that big mastery buff, kill the boss, move on. So I don't know. It was weird. Like when the week started, I was like, oh man, this is actually the worst one. Now that we've seen them all, like I really hate this.
Yeah.
And I do think it feels the worst, but the results I think for me were fine. I got some new portals this week. I got my dungeons done pretty efficiently from my vault. So I felt pretty good about it, but I do think this is sort of becoming the one that I feel like we collectively like the least. Maybe that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say. To me, it just highlighted in the dungeons this week that we had, like I said, we had a dungeon where we died 8 times and were able to time the key, and it was fine. We had a dungeon where we died twice and we couldn't time the key, and you're going, okay, like it was same people, same level of DPS, same group, and the fact that it literally was just a situation you're going, okay, why is there such a large difference in discrepancy in timers? I feel like the timers should be more forgiving, period. I just feel like they should in some of these keys, or at least try to balance them off against each other. Like it shouldn't be a situation where like Arakara is a timer where, hey, you know what? If you get to that third boss and you have 8 minutes left, then there is a chance for sure that you can still complete that dungeon, and that's fine. As long as you're there with this much time left on the timer and you've kind of done the math and figured it out for yourself. That regardless of what happened earlier in the dungeon. Great. That's totally cool. If you shouldn't be in a situation where it's like, okay, we had 2 deaths, let's just start this key over again because we know the timer's tight enough that is the factor. And you're like, okay, like that should never be a situation until you get into like 15s and 16s. And like
that's
that
such
kind
a
of
high bar of execution for that difficulty level. Yeah, it really is.
So there are definitely some 10s and 11s out there that still live in that realm of being less forgiving. And I think that's something that they could look at balance-wise across the dungeons going, yep, we're going to bump out a timer by 30 seconds or a minute or whatever it is. Or we're going to reduce that it would be a better idea. We're going to reduce that 7 punishment from 15 seconds to 12 or to 10. Right, I think that would be a much better shift to go, okay, let's ease this off a bit so it's only 10 seconds per death, and then that way we start seeing how forgiving some of these dungeons are, because it definitely feels like there's still a few in the pool that the dungeons aren't oppressively more difficult, but the timers are just so much tighter that you have to take really risky pulls. Like you have to in order to complete the thing in time, and that feels weird to do on a 10. That's what feels weird.
I don't think that having to incur that risk is even that big of a problem, because it's kind of what's fun about Mythic Plus. But I mean, I do think like maybe there is some wiggle room with the penalty on the death timer thing.
Yeah.
Could maybe jumping straight to 15. Maybe that was a little too high, because you do, especially this is another thing that is sort of putting this undue stress, or like just making the pug experience worse, than it has been in previous seasons, which was already sometimes pretty bad. It's like if you have like an early death or an early pull just kind of goes wrong, well, doesn't matter if it's the second pull of the dungeon. You may now just be impossibly behind the timer. So why does anybody want to stay in that key, right? Like that then it really gets into the nitty gritty, like social engineering piece of like, why is everybody here? Does everybody agree to stick this out, get our 5 crests? Like maybe we just dial that penalty back a little bit, then, you know, it might prevent some of those situations.
All right. Well, I don't want to linger too long. Is there anything else you want to cover quickly before we hop into what's going on this week?
The only other thing I wanted to say was, you know, we had it was Dungeon Week. I mean, today's the last day of it. It's ending. But they changed it so that if you do heroic dungeons, if you do 4 heroic dungeons, you get a piece of heroic raid loot.
Yeah.
I took massive advantage of that on the monk, the druid, and I even busted out the paladin for the first time this season in any kind of actual endgame. This is too good. Why are we giving away heroic raid loot for doing heroic dungeons? I don't like, I'm not going to say no to it, but you know, for 8 years now since Mythic Plus has come in, we just kind of chipped away at heroic raids, you know, position in the pecking order. And it's like, heroic raid loot is, except for those like really unique pieces that only come from the raid, it's just, they're just giving away heroic raid item level everywhere else. But I'm not going to say no to it. I got some really nice pieces. I got the activate heroic 4 piece on the monk from that box. I got a weapon on the paladin. Like the paladin's in super low gear and instantly has a hero track weapon with some pretty decent stats on it. Like it's great, but you know, I guess the natural counter argument is like, I'm never going to heroic raid on these tunes anyway, so what's the difference? I, as the player, am still spending my time doing my heroic raiding on a regular basis, but it does feel a little bit weird to have, like, my monk essentially is like past the stage of even needing heroic raid gear and has never heroic raided this season. So, you know, it's kind of a weird spot, but man, I don't know why they decided to dish out such a juicy reward for such minimal effort, but there was no way I was going to say no to it. If I have time tonight, I might even take the Demon Hunter through. I mean, heroic dungeons are just, you know, the hardest part of the heroic dungeon is having to maybe deal with the dynamics of whoever you queued in with into like a Mists of Tyrannosaith or something, where there's like some weird mechanics that people need to understand with the maze or, you know, with the guessing game on second boss or whatever. Like that's harder than any actual mechanical element of the dungeon. And then you get like one guaranteed piece of super high item level loot. It might be too generous, but I certainly wasn't going to say no to it.
I feel like Mythic gear has become the now that is the prestige, if you will. The people who are like, oh man, I can't believe that person's walking around in, you know, gear, and it used to be a certain tier set or things like that. I think it's now become Mythic gear, which is almost why they've also added like, hey, here's now visual effects once you get the Mythic transmog. The shoulders now like have smoke coming off them or something. Like they started doing those sorts of effects to the Mythic sets, because I feel like it has become more and more this is now the threshold of impressive walking around in gear transmog kind of prestige. Normal and heroic, normal being the thing that is probably rated most frequently of those 3 difficulties, is something that a lot of people have more access to. Heroic is becoming the thing that more and more people are starting to dive into since gear is getting more and more accessible. Mythic is like the last holdout as far as that goes. And I'll say all of that underneath the umbrella of raiding in general is still not the massively popular thing inside World of Warcraft. It is something that people who raid love to do and participate in. The broader player base is still playing this like a single player game. So it's still one of those things where you're like, all right, we have to understand that, I don't think there's a problem necessarily with someone who's never going to step foot in a raid having a decent item level set of gear for completing world content when they're out fishing and doing whatnot and want to knock a creature off of their back. Or if they want to kill all the rares, they can work their way around and kill some rares. Like that's fine. That doesn't affect my play at all. I'm fine with them getting gear towards that. But you're right. It's become more and more accessible as it goes. I don't know if it's a problem, but it certainly is a difference, and it's something that's changed. So, yeah.
I mean, I think in years past, I would say like this is gonna. And stuff like this, like between this and the scale of delve rewards and everything, it's going to just make people check out a rating. I don't think that that's true anymore. I think people either raid or don't. If they want to, then they do it. Nobody's going to continue to raid consistently just for rewards, because they're not really like a means to their own end, right? You want the reward so you can finish the raid or do the next higher difficulty or whatever. If you're not raiding, then I guess it's fine if you get stuff from non-raid activities that make you feel good about playing the game.
Yeah.
It is really hard to kind of wrap my brain around how high I've already scaled up a couple of these characters' item level without having done any kind of significant raiding or keystones, right? Just solo or queuable content. It's cool, but have we overshot it a bit too much? Like maybe, I don't know. I think the problem too is like, how do you dial it back at this point? Like, you don't want to take the stuff away from players now that we've had it. So I don't know. I guess we'll see if like by season 3, if I just have like nobody left to raid heroic with because the item level just comes from other sources. And so nobody actually likes raiding. I don't think that that's going to be the case, but I guess like overall it's better to just seed cool rewards in more different activities for people to do. But I kind of wish that heroic raids still had more of a profile, like there was a reason why you wanted to get in there and get okay, you have the trinket, the ring that I mentioned earlier. Like there's cool stuff in there, but it's not like it maybe used to be before we had all these sources of gear at equivalent hero track item levels. So I don't know. It's a big shift for the game, and we're too early in the process to see like what kind of ripples it's going to have. But man, heroic raid loot for doing 4 heroic dungeons is just incredible.
Yeah, I will also say the crafting system added to that dilution, if you will, of heroic stuff, given that all you have to do is story mode Queen Ansarek to get a token that lets you craft a heroic item level piece. Similarly with, the renown tracks, when you finish any of the renown tracks, you get a token to craft a heroic level piece. So they are making heroic level gear kind of the open world end game, if you will, as an item level track as opposed to normal, which is what we'd normally see inside of earlier expansions, is normal equipped gear being the open world cap of where people end up. So they've shifted that, which I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It doesn't really affect the way I play the game, so I'm not super concerned about it, but it is something that is worth keeping an eye on and just seeing what the sort of knockdown effect is over time, as you sort of talked about. Okay, let's hop into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. All right, this week is the Arena Skirmish bonus event, where the honor gains from Arena Skirmishes are increased by 50%. There's a quest to win 10 of them, and you can get yourself some conquest and honor for completing that quest. The Call of the World Soul is something this week. We, again, don't know what the rotation is or how it works, or it's on a bi-weekly or what's happening with it, but just be sure you're heading outside of that inn in Dornegal and picking up the quests that are out there. We believe this week...
We had Titan Disc fragments this past week.
Yeah.
So that means, I think, my guess is that means it's going to be tied to some kind of activity in particular, like delves or something like we've seen before. And then we'll have Call of the World Soul next week. But it might just be, maybe we're done with all this stuff now and we're just on Call of the World Soul every week and you pick whatever you want to do. We'll see. It's still a learning process. It's kind of part of the fun, I guess. It's like, what's going to happen this week when we log in?
I would not be surprised if the quest is linked to the anniversary event that's kicking off, sending people over there to do something involving the anniversary event. That would not surprise me in the least, but that could be a totally separate quest. We'll have to see what they choose to do. Either way, you want to be sure that you are completing at least 2, if not 4, of the max level sort of ways that you can earn pinnacle caches, whether that's the getting out there and doing your world quest your world quest completing 3 inside of a zone to unlock the mighty better world quest, these world events, doing World Soul Memories, Awakening the Machine, Theater Troop. Oh, they're special assignment world quests. That's what I was trying to remember what they were called. Spreading the Light is another really easy way, putting in 4 of those fragments lighting 4 of those braziers with 12 of those fragments, 16 of those fragments, 12 of those fragments, to be able to light those up and get yourself a reward cache from that. Doing the Severed Threads Pact, which is just doing 5 world quests inside of that zone. So there's a few things that you can actually do to sort of earn these caches that are quite easy to do. Doing the first 4 earns you a key, which you can use inside delves to get some 603 loot, but also get yourself a chance at a map, which will get you that 610 hero track piece, and be able to work your way through that content as well. So yeah, and overall, it's a good thing to do is pick up those quests outside of the inn and be sure you're doing at least 4 of these things. I will also emphasize the theater troupe should be on your list of things if you're trying to do this, because the theater troupe and spreading the light, both of those 2 things, have a chance to drop BOE recipes that are very valuable recipes that crafters need. So those will be going up on the auction house, and you'll be making, 25, 30K easily off of those recipes if that's something you're looking to do. So choosing those 2 is just a beneficial thing. Even if you're a crafter, you might get something you need as far as recipes go for things like that.
Yeah, I mean, what I usually do is I try to do theater troupe right away. Like, I want to get my 4 keys for the week right on a tune. So the only problem with theater troupe is it only happens at the top of every hour. So you got to pay attention to what time it is when you're like logging in or when you're planning out how you're going to play. But it's like 8 minutes and you're done. And that's one of them off the list. Then I go do Severed Threads, because like you want to do that anyway, right? Like you want access to the world quest there. You want to get the rep for your chosen, pact for the week and all that. So then that's another one done easy, 5 world quests or whatever, and you're done. And then if the special assignment's in there, now you've unlocked that, you do that, that's 3. So that, then it depends on like, okay, what is the weekly for the Pinnacle Cache? Or maybe I'll go do Awakening the Machine or whatever. So you can get all 4 of those boxes to get your keys and get all that stuff knocked out pretty quick. And a lot of weeks there's an opportunity to double up, right? If the weekly is do theater troupe or do Awakening the Machine or something like that, even do a Severed Threads pact, although that one you got to do the rares and stuff, so that can be a little more time consuming. But if you can find those opportunities to double one up, man, like you can just get your weekly key and cash thing checked off your list in like under an hour if you time it out. So, which is important for me because I'm still doing delves and stuff on at least 2 characters a week. So I got to make sure I have my keys coming in and I have all that stuff rolling. So, you got to plan it out a little bit around the timing. But if you do that, then you can get all that stuff done pretty fast, I would say. Yeah. Compared to what it used to feel like in early Dragonflight to like do your weekly, where it was like, do these different events in the world that happen on different timers, and then, get this much rep, get 3K rep or whatever across the Dragon Isles. Like, I feel like every single week that was way more time consuming than getting your Pinnacle Cache and getting this other stuff done has turned out to be so far in War Within.
Yeah. All right. The brawl this week is Deep 6. That is 6 players are pitted against each other in Warsong Gulch, Silvershard Mines, and Temple of Kot Magu. Each battleground offers a little variation on the traditional format, with Warsong Gulch having the flags a bit closer. There's less carts on Silvershard Mines, and there's only 2 orbs within Temple of Kot Magu. If you complete one of these in a victory, then you get yourself some Marks of Honor, Conquest, and Honor. And yeah, overall, this is kind of a fun one. It's a different twist on these, and it can be kind of neat to get together with a group of friends or a small group of friends and queue up for these brawls, because you just have more impact. Like there's fewer people, so your personal contribution feels like it's making more of a difference. So if that's something you're looking for, be sure to check out the brawl this week. Orda, the Deep Walker Giant in Azj-Kahet, is the world boss for this week. It drops some 603 gear, so be sure you're looking at knocking that out. It also drops a crit haste ring, so if those are secondaries you're looking for, be sure you're knocking out this world boss. Mythic Plus Affixes for the week we believe, will be Xal'atath's Bargain Ascendant, which is what we said it would be last week. Yeah, it ended up being Oblivion, so I guess we don't know the rotation yet. We kind of thought we knew the rotation, but I guess there's more rotation to come. So we'll figure this out eventually as to how these go. So we believe it's going to be Ascendant. The same notes as last week, which is, hey, 10 orbs appear every minute while you're in combat, and they need to be interrupted, purged, knocked, or crowd controlled. And when the orbs essentially are destroyed, you get a movement speed and haste buff. And it's worthwhile getting rid of them because it's really easy to do. And we know that monks, as we mentioned last week, are really strong for this because you can drop down your Circle of Peace, your Ring of Peace, which then will continue to pop them since they spawn in over a 3 to 5 second period of time. But it is the week to be running things like Typhoon and any kind of knockback that you have. You can mass dispel these, I think, too, because it counts as a purge. There's a lot of things you can do to sort of get rid of them. So it's a great affix. I like this affix a lot. The movement speed feels really good. The haste buff also feels good, but I will say this is one of the least noticeable buffs that you get. The mastery one from last week, you feel on a lot of classes, either your survivability goes up as a tank or your damage goes up a lot more as a DPS. The, essentially 2% movement speed and haste per stack going up to 10 times isn't something you feel or notice as much. So that is certainly something to factor in. So overall, I think it'll be a fun Mythic Plus week. We're dealing with Fortified at level 4, so this will be the Fortified version of Ascendant that we're feeling early on in keys. Obviously, Tyrannical kicking at 10, so you'll be doing Fort and Tyrannical if you're doing 10s this week, and feeling the Ascendant situation, if it is Ascendant, which we think it is, based off of nothing.
Yeah, I mean, our logic here is that, okay, we thought it was going to be Ascendant this past week, but then Ascendant would always line up with low-level Tyrannical, right? Level 4 Tyrannical. Because that's what it was the first week of the season.
Yeah.
So our logic here is that they probably swapped Oblivion in for week 5, because then before we had Oblivion Tyrannical, Oblivion Fortified. This week we had Oblivion Tyrannical. Next week we'll get Ascendant Fortified, which is a combo we haven't seen yet, at low rank at level 4. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, we probably need one more full rotation all the way through, at least, before we totally understand what's coming each week. But that's what I'm thinking at this point. And yeah, it's now been 5 weeks since we've seen Ascendant. So I will say, movement speed is pretty underrated. So that is nice. It just helps you, switch targets or get around the battlefield if you're in combat. It helps you get up to the next pole a lot faster. Again, we got tight timers, so that's good. Haste is funny because a lot of specs really like haste, but then you gear for haste, and then you have so much haste that more haste doesn't really benefit you that much. But I'm never going to say no to more haste. I mean, it's basically like, a mini hero every time you pop these. So a really mini hero, but a mini hero. So hopefully this is the one. I want this one to come back around, because it's been more than a month now since we've had it. So I want it to come back around, and I want to sort of feel like I'm understanding the rotation and sort of mastering the whole system,
Yep.
I do think this one is noisy, right? If this is the one that we get, it puts 10 plates in the field, but they go away pretty quick, and a lot of classes have tools to deal with these.
Yeah.
There was definitely some lessons learned with this versus something like Incorporeal and Dragonflight, where it was like, well, here's these things that pop up, but only some people can deal with them. So better dedicate kicks to them or whatever. You don't have to do that. You could drop a shockwave or whatever, and off they go. So I like that. You definitely have to pay attention to them. You have to react to them, and you have to commit abilities to them. But then you get your benefit, and everybody can help participate pretty much. I mean, I think every spec has something they can contribute to knocking out some of these. So
yeah,
I think it's a pretty good one, and a bit less disruptive than Oblivion, for example. These are going to spawn somewhere in the field, and you're going to have to probably move around to react to them. But if you have Storm Bolts, you can knock out 3 of them, without having to be right on top of them. And it doesn't matter where they are in relation to stuff you're fighting. So that's pretty good. And low level Fort is also nice, because if you're trying to do those 8s for crests or 9s for crests, or you're trying to work your way up to 10s, I feel like it's just a lot less pressure. Fortified, there's some nasty trash in this pool, man. Grim Batol trash is it just hits you in every imaginable way all at the same time. There's definitely nasty trash in this pool, but when you kill trash, it stays dead. And, I feel like it's a lot more amenable to meeting those timer checks versus Tyrannical, where if you invest a lot of time and you invest bloodlust or whatever into a boss fight, and then there's a mistake, and if it's Tyrannical, it's very punishing and people die. You've lost so much time as a result of that. Yeah. So low fort should also help teams a lot with just getting crest done, getting some hero track gear, and working their way up the system. So if that's how it all lines up for this week, we know it's going to be low level fort. I think it's going to be great. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting in there.
Yeah. All right. Hallow's End is starting up tomorrow. Well, later this week. It's the 25th is when it actually kicks off. So folks will be looking forward to this coming Friday when that all launches. And the things from 2023 that we know about is there were 5 new achievements, including Trick or Treats of the Dragon Isles. There was a new offhand cosmetic with a bucket of morbid treats for 150 tricky treats. There was the Windborn Velocidrake's Hallow's End armor, and Arfis the pet from the Loot-Filled Pumpkin, as well as the Scarlet Key from the Loot-Filled Pumpkin, which unlocks Scarlet Monastery, including the vanilla loot to Scarlet Monastery, if that's something you're looking for transmog and whatnot for. So those were things from last year. We don't know what's going to be kicking off this year, but we do know that the anniversary event starts tomorrow, and then Hallows Eve kicks off on the 25th. So we are going to have a very busy week when it comes to things to do for folks and what people want to get their time involved into. It also means that the anniversary experience buff that we get is going to overlap with the 10% experience buff you get from doing the Wicker Man burning outside of Stormwind and Undercity. And since this thing is running until Friday, November 8th, it means that we will also have Darkmoon Fair on November 3rd overlap with this 10% buff on top of the anniversary event buff. And we could potentially have a ridiculous super week for leveling characters, which is something that everyone should be looking out for. So there could be some crazy, like, 50% increased experience gain situation that happens for folks who are wanting to level characters, which might mean that we have a ideal week for folks to do that with. Maybe there's even some time walking that rolls into that you could stack into there for some super crazy easy leveling. Well, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. So yeah, definitely keep your eyes open for this. I love Hallow's End. I'm certainly going to be involved. There should be the Headless Horseman event based off of Brewfest. They'll be seeing 571 eye level loot off of Headless Horseman. So that's certainly an option for folks to get out there and get some loot early on for their characters. But also, like, the rings that you can get off of there. There's the, the Horrific Hood and the Horseman's Reins and the Magic Broom, which is that instant mount that people are going to be doing. People are really curious if this instant mount is going to be a dragon riding style flying mount, which I hope it is, because that would be cool for everyone to experience what Druids can experience for that one period of time, because it is a fun thing for a lot of folks to be able to hop on a mount and instantly take off. The Hollowed Helm is going to be around. We can add to the massive collection of Sinister Squashlings if you're someone who's been picking them up every year and they never sell for anything and you have to actually destroy them to get rid of them. I almost wish there was like a turn-in for like a pumpkin donation or something like that. Like there's some farm out in South Shore or something that you could go to and be like, here's all of my Sinister Squashlings for your like garden that you run. And there's just a bunch of Sinister Squashlings running around in the garden because this is the pet that just like is abundant and everywhere and people have tons of every season. It'd be neat to have some silly little turn-in quest.
Yeah, like you play off of that somehow in the game. Yeah. But yeah, Hallow's End is just like massive. It's one of the biggest holidays, if not the biggest holiday. It's just in terms of the amount of stuff to do. And we don't know what's new yet, obviously. Like the event hasn't started in game yet. And, I didn't like PTR. I don't go digging around for data mining for stuff like this. They added a ton of stuff last year. I think it's reasonable to assume that we're going to get new trick or treat
for sure
buckets across Kaz Algar and probably an achievement tied to that or something. So, be looking out for that. Probably some new stuff to buy from Tricky Treats, but probably minor stuff like Brewfest, for example. It's a pretty big holiday and there's a ton of stuff to do. They didn't add anything new to do this year. And they added one new thing to buy for a relatively small amount of Brewfest tokens. I think we might see something similar to that. But, don't forget, man, there's stuff to do in Draenor. There's quests in your garrison. There's also like some unique stuff you can get for that. You get the decorations for your garrison if you never got them before. There's also the faceless coin you can get from the mobs out there from doing those quests, the toy that transforms you to look different. And, there's a fair amount of tricky treats you can get every day from doing those quests too. So don't forget the old stuff is out there in addition to any new stuff there might be, or if you didn't play last year, the new stuff to collect from 23. Arthas, the Lich King's dog, the ghost of the Lich King's dog is certainly that was a highlight from last year for sure. This is also the first time we're seeing Headless Horsemen since they changed the drop logic on the holiday bosses to have streak protection. So if you're still shooting for the Horseman's Reigns, like this year is going to be probably the best chance you've ever had. But if you do the event every day, you're going to get an increasing chance for it to drop. So that's really cool. Yeah, we'll see about how all the different XP buffs end up, how much they stack up or work with each other. But man, there's just so much stuff to collect from this. I think in my case, I'm all the way caught up. I kind of slacked off for a couple years and then I had to make up for it and get a whole bunch of stuff. I was taking like 3 tunes through one a couple years ago just to check stuff off the list. And then last year I missed most of Hallow's End because I was in Japan and it started earlier in the year. So I came back and I had a couple days left, but I did get the Velocidrake armor and Arthas. Like somehow the loot god smiled upon me and I was able to get those 2 things. So I don't have to shoot for those, but I don't know if I got the Scarlet Key. I don't think I did. So there's definitely some stuff on my list, and then we'll see whatever's new to buy. But yeah, Hallow's End is awesome. You know, you can get those costumes and stuff. They're so cool, and you just become Lich King or a humanoid form, Deathwing or whatever. Yeah, there's all kinds of cool stuff. So great event, but man, yeah, we do maybe this year are veering into the realm of like, there's actually too much stuff to do in the live game right now. like what actually do I do? Because I have Hallow's End to do. I have 20th. I have my just regular diet of WoW stuff that I'm doing. Like it's a lot. I guess like the answer is prioritize Hallow's End over 20th if you got to pick, because Hallow's End is only here for 2 weeks and 20th will be here through January or like into January. So, or just chain yourself to your gaming PC and just make all of those little blue exclamation points and stuff go away every day. You know, don't forget about. I mean, I almost forgot to mention this. Like, even in Legion, they added some little things. Like, there's the little hub in Val'sharah in Bradensbrook. There's that daily over there. There's unique appearances. The like witch hats you get from that, and also that's more tricky treats.
The garrison back in Warlords of Draenor has the Halloween appearance for the garrison, as well as quests there to get more tricky treats. If that's something else you're looking to do, like
stuff all over the entire world. You know, they've added Hallow's End stuff too. So if you're looking at your shopping list going, man, I got to get a lot of tricky treats, like they're out there, and you should be able to move them around your warband at this point as well. So if you want to, like, sometimes that makes a difference. You know, if you seem to get to some round number, you need the next 150, and it's the difference between doing a whole bunch of stuff for many days in a row on one tune versus doing a little bit of stuff on a couple tunes today, and then you're done. Like that should be an option as well.
Yeah.
That's a new feature since 11.0.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So definitely be sure you're checking out Hallow's End when it kicks around. We also had hotfixes this week. However, we have the big patch next week, so obviously the hotfixes are a little bit less than they normally would be, but we did see defeating Zekvir in his lair for delves now rewards crests and valor stones once per week, so there is still a reason to knock that guy out once a week. It doesn't count towards your vault, but it is one of those benefits, I guess.
Well, I think the fix was it used to reward crests and valor stones every time. So it was like a valor stone farm that people were doing.
I do not remember getting valor stones from him at all.
Yeah, I think he did. So I'm pretty sure the change here was this used to be repeatable and is now once per character per week. They just really don't want you to do Zekvir. Like, okay, like he's there, do the quest, try to do it on question mark, and get your thing done, and then never do it again.
Yeah.
It's how the mighty have fallen. 3 weeks ago, Zekvir was just like, you just do Zekvir. That's what War Within is. Now, that's a good reason to change it, right? Like, you don't want that to be the way that the expansion is. But, the reasons for checking in with Zekvir on a regular basis are dwindling.
Yeah. We already talked about the fact that Oblivion, the Xal'ata's Bargain, was changed so that the crystals now float towards players if there isn't an enemy in combat. But they also did a change for Voidbound, which makes an argument for the fact that we might see Voidbound this week. I don't know. We'll see. That players, the buff has been changed, so players now gain 20% versatility and 30% cooldown reduction, as opposed to 50% cooldown reduction and 10% increased healing received. This is massive. This is a massive change. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, yes, going from 50% to 30% is a nerf, and yes, you will feel that between what you used to be doing with your cooldowns, but I do feel like a lot of people's cooldowns were getting really out of sync, and that was potentially throwing some people, so 30% will help that a little bit. But 20% versatility is insane. That is literally so much, 20% increased damage and damage reduction that you're going to be seeing. Players are going to be cranking Keystones the next time Voidbound is around. I'm super excited about this. It's going to feel really good the damage reduction alone is going to be massive in this situation for people being able to get their keys done in time and people being able to have fun in their keys. So I'm super excited for the next time Voidbound comes around. I really want to see what this feels like, because man, that is some hefty versatility feeling for people.
Yeah, that's a great change, I think. I mean, yeah, you are losing some CDR, but like you said, I mean, in a lot of cases, CDR was just making things more awkward for some specs. And there's other specs, like for Prot Warrior, for example. Like, I have so much baked in CDR based on my throughput and like using my abilities and spending rage, that like reducing it even 50%, like it didn't feel that impactful. You know, I'm already reducing my cooldowns massively just but in the course of performing my rotation and my priority. So I would much rather have 20% verse, you know, than any of these other benefits on offer. The healing received one was weird. Like, it's cool, but if you're not taking any damage, like if you're not the tank and you're not fighting stuff that is doing like party-wide damage, then that is not a benefit, right? You're not receiving any healing in that window at all. So that's just a buff that is not doing anything for you. 20% versatility will always be doing something for you, which is awesome. And also, it also has that similar effect of it decreases the healer burden for the duration, right? Like 15% increased healing received also reduces that burden, but if your players are getting hit less hard, then that reduces your burden equally, or maybe not totally equally, but enough. Plus, it's all going to die so much faster that it's just, you know, you avoid maybe some bad overlaps or whatever. So I think this is a great change to this buff. It sounds like, I mean, you see, like verse is a stat that it's funny because it's not like a sexy stat, right? It doesn't change how your spec really feels. It doesn't speed up how much you can push your buttons. It doesn't result in you getting that big crit streak that then this other stuff procs off of or whatever. And also, like, early in expansions, it's hard to get enough versatility on gear for that stat to stack up. But when you get Voidbound and you just get 20% flat verse, like, that's massive, dude. That's such a good buff. So yeah, I think it's a cool change, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that feels when it comes back around.
As far as dungeons go, Dawnbreaker got itself a fix that I'm super happy to see. Rashanan will no longer continue fighting the players after being brought below 60% health. There was some really, really weird things happening where, like, people were intentionally getting the boss to a certain percentage of health before throwing the bombs, because then when they threw the bombs at the right time, it set his health low enough that when you got down to the second phase, you didn't have to DPS him as long there, because otherwise you'd have to drop him to like 59.5 or 58.5%, which is a substantially longer DPS time. It was very weird. And I know for me, I had a very hard time keeping track of when the fight was supposed to end, because you go below 60% and you'd be like, okay, we're still fighting him. What's happening? We've passed that threshold. When does this end? And you just kind of keep going, and you're watching the timer and you keep going. And like, I dislike that. So I'm glad it's now just like, no, when he hits 60%, it's over, it's done. We have a stop time. That makes me super happy. So hopefully this feels better for everybody else as well.
Yeah, great change. It was like this really weird sort of min-maxing that you were supposed to do with the bombs, like you mentioned, where it was like you had to hold them at a certain like 10th of a percentage before you got that last bomb in, because then that would be like the lowest possible health that it would go into phase 2 with, which would then make it the most expedient to defeat phase 2. And yeah, I mean, like, it's a weird fight, right? Because you're fighting a dungeon boss with a raid boss amount of health, because you're not killing it. But yeah, it created some weird issues like that, and we saw it too with the healing affix, where it was like healing for way too much because of the percentage.
Nothing
healing,
like 10% healing on a raid boss. Oh my god.
Yeah, it was a lot of health that it was getting back. So, you know, they're just tweaking some. It's a weird boss. It behaves differently than other bosses, so it needs some different attention when it comes to this kind of tuning.
Yeah, so that I'm glad that got all fixed up. The Naruto Palace hotfixes came in as well for people who are doing raid stuff. The Silken Court, the moat duration before explosion, this is on Mythic, was 15 seconds, but they increased it to 20 seconds. They're making Silken Court a lot easier for folks who are doing Mythic progress on that. Void Degeneration and Burning Rage now kill players at 4 stacks as opposed to 3. That's a substantial nerf to Mythic for folks who are trying to kill that. Queen Ansarek got some changes on heroic difficulty with frothing toxin damage reduced by 15%, as well as gloom blast damage reduced by 15%, as well as when calculating applications of frothy toxin, only living players are now counted towards the maximum possible application amount on heroic and mythic, which is massive because it means if you lose a player early in the fight, you are no longer in a situation where, oh, well, now we are just, there's no avoidable way for us to get us not to get 3 stacks or 4 stacks of frothy toxin, because this player died and now our groups are massively uneven and there's nothing we can do about that. It's just going to happen. So if the fact that it's only counting living players now means that you can consistently get those 2 stacks as long as you're balancing your groups properly, which is great. So that's a huge change for the heroic side of it. And then on Mythic, they just went to town on Ansarek. 5% health nerf, 26% frothy toxin damage reduced, Silken Tomb by 20%, rest damage by 25%, the Grasping Silk maximum size reduced by 10%, Shadow Gate cast time by increased by 20% for that interrupt that needs to happen, Gloom Blast damage reduced by 25%, Acolyte's Essence periodic damage reduced by 15%, Essence Scared duration, Essence Scarred duration was increased by 50%, as well as the Royal Condemnation reduced by 10%, and finally the Acolyte of Death's health and barrier amount was reduced by 15%, as well as the Royal Shackle health reduced by 15%. So they basically went, hey, we recognize that Ansarek was still tuned for Team Liquid. We should probably back this off a bit so that, you know, some other teams that are not Team Liquid could be able to kill this. We don't want players putting in 450 to 500 pulls on this thing. Let's make sure that it's actually a boss that's more killable. So this, coupled with the weekly 2.25% increase that's going to continue to increase for teams, should make Ansarek a very achievable boss for Mythic teams that are out there trying to prog over the next month and a half or so, which I think is great. That's what we should be seeing, because then they can get a month and a half or 2 months of rest time with farm before we move into the next content, which I think should always be happening when it comes to these bosses. So glad to see that changes coming in, but the heroic changes to Frothy Toxin to me are massive changes. Those are really big for teams that are out there progging.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of the fight on heroic is just learning that phase 1 dance and executing it, you know, and this has really lowered the bar of execution. The biggest change really is that the only living players count towards applications of frothy, because so many times, I mean, we had, I don't know, while progging the fight, we had 50 plus phase 1 wipes, you know, and a lot of those were just because people not executing the circle assignments or being dead early, and then Frothy Toxin just hit too hard when you have 4 or 5 stacks of it. That kills people, and then the cycle continues. So now it's like if you have an early death or 2, as long as it's like 1 or 2 and it doesn't like throw off your balance too much between, you know, how many players are where, then like you can just go through phase 1. So I think avoiding that kind of situation where you need to call a super early wipe is great. Like that's a great change. Of course, all these changes come in after my team kills it. That's what happens. Like once my team kills it, then the devs go, okay, like it can be nerfed now. Like the bar has been cleared, and then you know, then the changes come in. It happens almost all the time, I feel like. And yeah, I mean, Mythic changes, like, I don't know how many teams are up to Mythic Ansarek yet, but like, obviously the raid is still pretty hard in the back half of it. But yeah, really big changes to, you know, like health on almost everything, which is good. And, you know, I do think like they obviously like tune the raid for the Harlem Globetrotters for the race, you know, and then they have to dial it back, and this is a big part of that process. And I wonder if we'll continue to see like hard nerfs, or if they're going to just wait and see how the buff kind of plays out and see if they can keep it tuned a bit higher and players will overcome it with you know, buff stacks and with better gear. I don't know. That like as big as these nerfs are, that it's still going to need some attention between now and then to get it to where they really want it to be for the end of the season.
Yeah. The current count on Queen Ansarek prog teams is 59 that I have. So there's 59 teams that are currently working on Queen Ansarek. So not a massive amount, considering there were 1,100 that were stuck on Ovanax. I don't know. A bunch of those will probably move now. It's probably closer to 700 or so. But yeah, it's that wave of teams is working their way through, and seeing some changes to Silken Court and some changes to Queen Azrak are certainly welcome. All right. We have talked at the top of the show about Narrowbar Finery. That is the sort of passive nerf that is happening to the raid by you collecting these finery and turning them in at the entrance to the raid. There were some hotfixes that went in for this, as well as some changes. Initially, players were receiving more finery than they should have. In other words, they were hitting the cap of 8 and then continuing to receive it. They resolved that in that people won't be able to turn in the extra finery past the weekly cap. So there is still a cap. I don't really know what they're doing with the extras that people earn, but yeah, in general, it's not something where people are like able to get an extra stack of the buff or something early. That's not a thing. They also basically put out a fix saying, hey, you got to log in and out if things were really broken with your finery. So players are able to get some of that resolved. Now, there was a post that went out for Severed Strands with the display bug. The Severed Strands is what the buff is called that you get for turning in the finery. And this came out from Linksy saying, hello, the Severed Strands buff tooltip is showing 0%. It is a visual bug only and will be fixed with the 20th anniversary update, which is tomorrow. The 2.25% damage and healing bonus from the buff is in fact working as intended. So players are in fact actually experiencing that. So yeah, if you got the buff, we're like, yay, I put in the effort and got this and turned it in and I get 0% increase. Huzzah. No, it's just a visual bug. You were actually getting 2.25%.
Like on your buff row, mousing over it, it's like, you gain 0%. Like, no. Thanks. But no, like, yeah, it was funny because I mean, this past week was the first time anybody could turn the quest in, right? And so people were turning it in and then mousing over, and it's like, yeah, you have a 0% buff, but it was definitely showing up. Like you could see it in the combat data, and yeah, they did confirm it with a blue post, so it should be, it'll be fixed by the next time we get a stack of it. And yeah, I mean, I guess the way it's going to work is you should get some finery from each unique boss that you kill per week, and then when you get to 16, then you turn it in for a stack, and it seems like that should be about every other week. And then so yeah, 2.25% a week, and then it's going to cap out somewhere around like 18% total or something like that. So that is going to be pretty hefty by the time we get all the way up there. I'm a little confused still about how it's really going to play out week to week, because I was getting 2 finery from some boss kills last week.
Yep.
So it seems like maybe, I don't know, do heroic bosses grant more than like normal bosses or something?
I think there's a chance. I think normal grants 1. I think heroic there's a chance to get 2. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, you get 1, and on Mythic you get 2. I think that's how it works, because that was my experience.
Right.
When I did clear this week, when I did clear last week, Heroic Mythic always granted me 2. So that was guaranteed. The clear this week, I got 1 from 2 or 3 bosses in Heroic, and I got 2 from one of them, and then I got 1 from the other one. So I think there was a balancing factor that happened there. And then Mythic bosses this week gave me 2. So yeah, it was one of those. I think that's how that system works, is there's just a chance when doing Heroic to get a second one.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if you kill it on a lower difficulty and a higher difficulty, can you get like the extra 1 from the higher difficulty or whatever?
I think it's once per kill per boss is how it works.
Yeah.
Period. Just straight across the board. Because that guarantees you get the 8. If you clear the whole raid, you get 8.
Right.
If you're clearing if you're working on the and that's like all the way down to LFR, you can get 1 from LFR if you wanted to. So you're guaranteed to get the 8 a week as long as you put the time in. It's just people who do heroic and mythic content have a chance to save themselves some time if they're doing like the heroic skip into mythic prog. You could then potentially like save yourself some time if you're just doing those last 2 bosses and then doing mythic prog, and you still need 1 or 2 left over. You could go and do like 1 LFR wing if you wanted to, or whatever it is, to finish off your buff for the week if that's something you need to do. So yeah, I think it's a decent system as to what we're seeing as far as that goes.
Yeah, it's like, it's gentle, but it definitely has an impact. And I mean, we are going to be in this. I mean, I know we obviously have BRD coming up this week as well, but I still think, Palace is going to be most teams' like big focus for
100%,
progression and clears. And so, yeah, like we're going to be in this raid for several months still, and it's really going to feel nice as this continues to stack up, and then you can get your alts in there, and your alts just benefit from it right away, and it should keep it feeling pretty fresh and just pretty fun to clear through, I think, as we go forward. So Well, first impression is pretty good, even though I think the rollout was a little confusing overall. I think having a more traditional quest presented to you, or like the item, you just like consume the item, you collect 16 of them or whatever, and then convert it into an item you consume. Maybe that implementation would make a bit more sense.
Yeah.
But, the way it all works out is fine. And I think, if hopefully, like, if this feels like a success, this would be a really cool thing to just have in raids for a while.
The number one issue with the system is if you haven't earned the currency on a character yet, you can't transfer currency to that character. So if you wanted to do the turn in on your main, right, you can't transfer some from your alt to your main until you've earned at least one on your main. That is an awkward part of the system.
But that should be resolved this week, because with the patch, there are changes to warband currency. So that is a weird quirk of warband currency right now, but that should not be an issue after this week. We'll see.
Should be. Yeah. Should be.
There's been a lot of type of situations applied to stuff with warband and warbank and currencies and stuff. But that's the intent anyway, is that going forward you should be able to just slide it around. So hopefully that'll be the case.
Yeah. All right. Before we hop into the anniversary event, what's going on with it with its big launch post, we will mention that there is a Twitch drop coming up this week. Starting tomorrow, you can get yourself the Sand Scarab pet for spending some time watching some Twitch streams. If that's something you're looking to do, you got to watch the channel for 4 hours, and you'll get yourself this fancy little Sand Scarab pet that's originally from the trading card game. So that's something you're wanting to get. Be sure you turn on a Twitch stream for the week. I know Jason will be streaming this week, so be sure you're hopping in to watch him and get yourself some Sand Scarab pet stuff. I might stream. I don't know if I will, but we'll see how things sort of play out. And you're good.
Yeah, I've been off stream for about a week. It just really kind of hasn't been the vibe. It's been a rough week around my corner of the world here. But I'm gonna stream this week with the anniversary going on and with drops going out. If people want to come get your pet, just stop on by twitch.tv/Shieldwald. And I'll be doing raid stuff and keystones and anniversary stuff and all. So come over there and it's always they've been. It took forever for them to start doing the Twitch drop stuff, but it's been pretty consistent over the last few years, and it's awesome because they have all these cool assets that have been locked behind stuff for like decades, and now we can finally get them again. So that's cool. I'm glad they're doing one for this like relatively small patch compared to like an expansion launch or a numbered patch.
Yeah. All right, anniversary event. How this thing's going to work is tomorrow. It kicks off. It runs until January 6th, 2025. There's going to be a sort of a whole campground set up outside of the Caverns of Time in Tanaris, where you can go to pick up all sorts of quests and things there. And there's going to be a lot of vendors there as well that accept the bronze celebration token currency that you can earn through doing tasks there, as well as engaging in things like the Blackrock Depths raid. The big advantage that a lot of folks are going after is collecting the iconic Tier 2 transmog sets, which, as we mentioned earlier, the first set is the expensive one, the second set is a reduced cost, and the third set is a massively reduced cost from then on. So there is the possibility, if you're participating very actively in the event, that you can collect all of the transmogs for Tier 2 in this one go of the anniversary event. However, if you don't worry. They will be bringing them back in future anniversary events for folks to earn going forward. There's also going to be time-walking versions of classic World of Warcraft dungeons for folks to hop in and check out Dire Maul and Dead Mines and all sorts of stuff in time-walking versions. Those will be accessible. You'll be able to earn the new mount, the Blizzard Employee Service Award cosmetic, as well as more fancy things. There's obviously world bosses that are there crashing the party. You can get in there and defeat the Shaw of Anger or the Archivon the Stonewatcher, who are going to be around as bosses that you can defeat in the area. There's a Blessings of the Bronze Dragonflight experience and reputation buff going, where you earn the initial 10%, but then can earn an additional 10% up to having a 20% experience gain buff through participating in the event itself. And yeah, man, Drakthir are getting new classes that they have access to being able to participate in. Drakthir are getting their like group flying thing. If you're looking to do that, that comes in tomorrow, as well as a lot of class reworks. But let's start off with this Blackrock Depths raid, since we were chatting raiding most recently. My biggest hope is this is a really fun experience that offers reasonable rewards, but does not have like the best rings and trinkets and necks in the game or something. Like I really don't want this to be a situation where it's like, yeah, forget about the current raid. it's not valuable anymore. All of the really good loot comes from Blackrock Depths. That's what I don't want to have happen, because it will really hamper a lot of teams' prog, which is a big problem.
Yeah, like I don't really know how I'm going to fit BRD into the schedule, and I think you can only bring 15, if I'm not mistaken. So like, it's cool that like I love the idea of bringing this back and like just spicing up like end game stuff for teams to do. I don't know how I fit it into my schedule right now. Like luckily we have plenty of time. January 6th is when this event ends.
Yep.
So, we'll figure it out, but I have it's a lot to try to manage the team's time, and also like there's specific things I really need to spend time doing in the game, like my +10s and all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's other time that I need to spend that it takes priority over this. And yeah, I'm sure there's going to be some trinket or something out of BRD that's going to be super valuable, even at low item level or whatever, and that you're going to want to get in there and try to fish for it. I think it's cool. It's a logistical challenge that I am not used to having to try to work through. So we'll see. I mean, maybe what my team ends up doing is saying, Sunday night is just BRD night, or like we kind of warm up. I don't know how long it's going to take. I guess that's also part of the equation. Like, is it going to be like a 45-minute run, and then we could go do a little bit of Mythic or whatever Palace on a Sunday? I don't know right now. So it's a weird. I was really excited about this when it was announced, and then October 22nd got here a lot faster than I thought it was going to.
Well, and prog-wise, yeah.
Yeah, like my team's doing great with prog. Like I'm really pleased at where we're sitting, but I'm not ready to just kind of box up Palace and say, okay, well, BRD is the priority for now. Yeah. So we'll just have to figure it out, man. And, maybe this is where the being part of the larger community of the ZTH comes in handy for us, where it's like, okay, somebody around the community is doing open runs, or we're doing like a Saturday afternoon BRD thing. Like, we'll get some people involved in that. We'll grab 15. Let's go do one, whatever, but it's probably going to be additional time investment beyond our typical schedule. So what were we saying earlier about there's just too much stuff to actually do in the live game right now? Like, how do you do it? And this is what we're going to have to find out.
Yeah. All right, moving from that, we already talked Tier 2 stuff last week in a big way about how the reductions are working and everything like that, so we've covered that already. The time-walking versions of Classic Dungeons, I'm excited for. This is going to be a fun experience for people to get into, and with all of the experience buffs that are happening, it'll be a great way to level characters. So I'm actually looking at leveling my, I guess, really first Evoker to max level. I don't think I ever got an Evoker to max level during Dragonflight. I have one, but I didn't actually get all the way there, so I'm looking at leveling an Evoker for sure. I'm also looking at leveling a couple other characters that are already sort of partway along the way and finishing them off. This could be a really fun way to do that. It's very familiar mechanics. I don't know how much they're going to revamp mechanics for this kind of experience, but in general, it'll be a new experience. It'll be something that players have not sort of felt before, because they're changing how the scaling works in Time Walking Dungeons. No longer are you scaling down to the dungeon. The dungeon's going to scale up to you, which means I'm hoping this feels really good for players. I don't know how it's going to feel, but I think it'll be a curious experience either way. So we'll see how that works.
I think it's entirely possible that time walking is just harder in general.
Could be.
But maybe not. If they tune it up to be the equivalent of like a normal dungeon, I think that's fine. I think that's about where it belongs. I would say they've been a fair bit easier than a normal dungeon for the last few cycles here, last few patches. So I think it's okay if they're a little bit harder, but you don't really want them to exceed like normal mode difficulty, because especially these aren't dungeons people are going to see all the time, right?
Yeah.
You can't expect people to be familiar with them every time they roll around. Now, granted, I assume that the classic time walking dungeons are just going to be available throughout the duration of the event. It'd be weird if they were like in the 12-week pool. Like, if so, I guess we'll find out. We'll find out next week if that's the case. But one thing about time walking that's obnoxious is it tamps your character stats down. I think it even still templates you. Like, there's just like a certain amount of stats you end up with, and that can feel really bad depending on how you're geared and what stats you want to have on your character. So that should go away, because your character should just have your same stats and everything like that going into a time walking dungeon. So that should be a big win. And even if
well,
the difficulty shifts a bit forward, I think it should still feel better to play.
Yeah, I think it should feel better to play. The concern I have with it is time walking initially you could queue into, as long as you were above that level as far as gear goes, it would scale you down and you were good. The dungeon scaling up and you remaining the same means that your item level now actually matters going into these dungeons. Because if you have a 620 geared character or a 580 geared character, there's a dramatic difference in how easy or hard this is going to feel for you on that character. So because you're no longer going, oh, well, it doesn't matter whether you're 580 or 620, guess what? You're 163 inside of this time walking dungeon, right? So they both sort of even out to the same place. That's no longer happening. So it's just factoring in, okay, where is the difficulty of these going to land? Is this something that, as you said, is going to be normal dungeon level, which I think is probably a pretty reasonable spot for them to sit? Because, yeah, if you are someone who's like, hey, I want to time walking my character, is this scaling individually based off of each character? So if I'm a 540 geared character, the mobs have X amount of health for me. I'm doing percentage-based damage to them, basically, comparatively to everybody else. Or is it a situation where, you know, essentially these are static, normal dungeon mobs, and me at 540 can hardly do anything to them versus the guy who's 580 or 600 who's hitting them with damage, and it's just because I'm so under geared for doing that content. Like that could be the situation. Time walking used to be something that you were never under geared to do, whereas now you potentially could be. So that's one of the things that's out there.
Yeah, it's going to be a different world, you know, for sure. I think, I agree that it might be for like max level but low gear tunes. It might feel quite a bit worse, depending, because there's no like item level restriction on it. It's just a character level, and as long as you're level 10 or higher, you can time walk. Yeah. So, yeah, that I think that could definitely create maybe some pain points for lower geared max tunes. I mean, time walking also it really in recent years has not been a good way to gear up. It's a good way to level up, but then once you get there, it's like, okay, well, all of this gear that is dropping and all the gear I can go buy is pretty garbage, you know.
There hasn't been something good since Legion. Legion's the last time there was an armor trinket that was worthwhile picking up if you were someone who was doing stuff.
Yeah, they're just like they tamped all this stuff way back. You know, it's just it's very low item level stuff. And now, I mean, between like the stuff you could buy with resonance crystals and the currencies account wide, and all the warbound until equipped stuff you might have been picking up along the way, it's like it's not really a factor. So I guess that's okay, right? Like maybe we exist in a world now where you can do that because you go from 79 to 80. All right, now I'm in junk item level and this time walking is going to stink, but I have resonance crystals because this is an alt or whatever, and I can go immediately get some 584s. I got some stuff waiting in the bank, and then I can kind of get in there. So maybe the other systems around it kind of support that better now.
Yeah, maybe. Outside of that, there's also the guest relations area where there's a secret area. I guess the secret community that exists around World of Warcraft, the secret solving community could be interested in the guest relations area, where basically folks are going to pick up clues and they're going to have to go out in the world and try and solve puzzles to get interesting rewards. Obviously, none of that's been discovered yet because it isn't live yet, but yeah, this can be a fun thing for folks to jump into and try and check out. There's also going to be Korak's Revenge in Alterac Valley back to celebrate, as well as the back pieces from the trading post that we talked about, the 30-year World of Warcraft and Warcraft 3 themed back pieces at the trading post for folks to pick up. So that's going to be super exciting as well. Okay, Drakthir with new classes. I already know some folks are looking at changing over to Drakthir, as Hunter, Rogue, Priest, Mage, Warrior, and Warlock are all becoming accessible classes for Drakthir to play. So this is certainly something that I know some folks are going to swap around a bit to jump in there and experience their dragonness that exists with this. So that's going to be fun for a bunch of people, which is going to be cool.
Yeah, really cool to see this come in. It's a little, the timing is a little weird, but hey, why not? I think it's cool that they do stuff like this in these interstitial patches, I guess, because before it used to be like, well, if something isn't in a huge numbered patch, like we're just not getting anything anytime soon. But instead, this is a pretty big change. I think it's cool to open up a playable race to a bunch of new classes. And I really like the idea of being able to fight more in your Visage form, which you can't do as an Evoker. but you can kind of choose when you play one of the the traditional classes. So that's cool. I really like that option with the Worgen that I have, and when that came in, then I set it that way. So it's like, okay, I'm a werewolf in combat, and then I turn back into a Gilnean gentleman when I'm out of combat. I love that, and I think the visage form of the evoker is really sort of an afterthought in a lot of ways. I feel like, because you can't use it in combat, and like I have an evoker that I played a fair amount in Dragonflight, and like I was never walking around in visage form, but this kind of changes all that. I think if I could definitely see playing one of these other classes and either staying in visage form like all the time, or just having it so it switches in combat. I think that option is super cool for the kind of shape-shifting, transforming races. Yeah. So I like that a lot. I might end up making one because I don't have a Horde Drakthir, so maybe I'll try something different and just mess around with it. And it's going to be leveling season for sure.
It is certainly going to be leveling season.
I already have my 5, so I have my maxed out mentor bonus up to 80. And then all this other stuff is just icing on the. It's already so fast, and then with all these bonuses coming in, it's just going to be like level whatever you want, just go do it.
It's going to feel really good. I'm at 4, so I am saving my 5 for when this goes live, and I'll get my my Drakthir leveled up, my Evoker leveled up, and then it'll be all right, how many characters on my account do I want to push to max level? Because you have the option. If there's something you haven't leveled you want to, feel free, go ahead. That's going to be exciting. Also, Dark Iron Dwarves are going to have new Mole Machine exits coming in tomorrow with Kultiras, Zandalars, Dragon Isles, and Shadowlands exits for those Dark Iron Dwarves with their racial, so be sure you're taking advantage of that. Now we get into class changes, and I will emphasize that if you are playing World of Warcraft on a character, you probably want to check patch notes for class changes with any of these patches that come in. This is a particularly large patch pass for this sort of thing. This is something that a lot of people speculated, hey, these are things they didn't really feel went live in the place they wanted them to, so they were planning and waiting for a time where they could actually do this. Balanced Druid is among those things, which is what I'm currently playing. I dug into these changes pretty hard when these notes went live. I'd already played around with the PTR talent tree to sort of see whether or not something in the talent tree was something I wanted to change or not, and how talents were coming along. And I'd spotted some things that stood out to me as like, hey, that is definitely a change, but I also missed a few of them. And so it was interesting to go through the notes and see those, and then go through like people who tested the PTR since the notes went live and see those, because there were even more changes that took place that were even hidden changes that weren't part of the notes. So across the board, Druids are getting a 3% nerf to the cost of Mark of the Wild. It's going from 4% to 1%, so rebuffing during combat obviously is an easier thing for folks to do and is less mana intensive, so that's great. That was a nice change to happen to come in. We're getting new icons for Convoke the Spirits and Adaptive Swarm. I presume this is just a way to move away from Shadowlands and the Shadowlands style icons and make them more class fantasy, which is great. Happy to see that happening. They're making it so that Elun's Chosen, as far as a hero talent goes, arcane spells cast by Convoke now trigger Lunation, which is a nice little buff for the sort of Convoke spell that exists in there. And then we dig into like the actual Balanced Druid stuff. And they are, initially when people were talking about the changes that were coming in, a lot of people were like, oh yeah, they're just redoing like the hero talent trees because they weren't happy with where those were at. Balanced Druids are having like their main tree redone. They're not having their hero talents so much. There's very minor changes to the hero talents. Their main tree is getting like 5 new abilities. They're getting some things moved to baseline. They're getting some things shuffled around the tree. There's the potential that our rotation will change dramatically in what we're doing. Even our cooldown usage will change. So if you're playing Balance, I definitely recommend looking at the notes. There's going to be sim stuff that people are doing tomorrow to try and figure out what the rotations could end up being. We might end up in a situation where we have Celestial Alignment on a 1 minute, a 1 minute and 20 second or 40 second cooldown with 2 charges on it. And we're using 1 minute Convoke, and we're essentially popping every minute CE into Convoke, CE into Convoke. Could be something that's happening every minute as our new rotation. It's unclear as to whether or not that's going to be the best DPS, but right now that is something that could be happening, which would be kind of crazy because if you look at like Fury Warriors, for example, they have pretty much 45 second cooldowns. Ret Paladins in their current iteration have very fast cooldowns, although they're getting completely redone again. So I don't really know what that's going to look like for them, but it seems like the majority of fights inside of the current raid are based around having 1 minute or 1 minute 30-second cooldowns. So moving balanced druids into that territory could be really attractive for the current raid. We're also seeing the single target damage being increased on Lunar Calling from 80% to 100%. So that'll help with the Loon's Chosen Lunar Calling. That'll help with people who want to take that spec choice and focus on just casting moon-based spells. We are seeing the moon talents actually get a little bit of work done to them as well. So some potential that we'll have some full moons being cast for people who want to cast those, because it's been 2 expansions since that was like a relevant thing to do. So I'll be very excited if they can actually make that relevant again. So yeah, I always loved the graphic of calling down a moon. It feels really strong and powerful, and it was very sad when it moved out of our rotation entirely because it just wasn't worth it. So glad to see that coming back potentially. Again, a lot of sims still have to happen for how this works. Probably one of the most fun abilities they're adding in is Sunseeker Mushrooms, where basically when you cast Sunfire, which hits a lot of targets, the damage of Sunfire has a chance to spawn a mushroom that then detonates and does more damage in that AoE area. And it's just a cool talent to have that happen. There is still the normal mushroom it's now a choice node, basically, of the normal mushroom that you can plant and like choose to detonate and blow up stuff in a certain area, which was neat back in the day, but has not been meta for a long time. And, so Sunseeker, I think, might find its way in for a lot of AoE fights where you're just like, yeah, I want more damage with my damage. This is fun. I'll take this. So I think some folks could have some fun with that. But yeah, Balanced Druid's getting a huge rework. It's definitely something I am worried about in Prague. I'm very much hoping we kill Ovanax tonight so that it's dead. And then when I go into tomorrow and I have to relearn how to play my class in my rotation, I'm not doing it while we're still on Prague and it changes my entire role in the raid and how that feels. That's not something I'm looking forward to, but we'll have to see what happens, because these changes overall should be a buff, I'd imagine, since balance is in a very bad spot at the moment. We're like in the bottom 5 DPS specs that are out there, and we're substantially behind the leaders with Enhancement Shaman, who are getting more buffs tomorrow. They will be doing more damage than they currently are, and they are 20% or 25% ahead of all the other DPS specs, really. So Enhance is crazy. So yeah, this is a time to be going on to the notes yourself, which we'll have in the show notes. Check in what's changing for your class and getting caught up on that, because you are going to feel it, man. I'm probably going to log into a reset talent tree, I bet. The only thing they're not touching for druids in general that everyone's asking them to please change, because there's a lot of really wonky, janky stuff with, is the actual druid talent tree. Nothing is changing in the actual druid class-based talent tree, only the spec-based trees. And so there is still the druid community has put out several blog posts on the Blizzard forums that have really outlined the reasoning about what they would like to do with nodes and how nodes could move and how they could be useful and fun. And none of those changes have been implemented in the actual druid tree. So I'm hoping we see those changes at some point, because it's a little rough in that department.
Yeah, that's sort of the pitfall of, I think, the overall class design, talent structure and everything, is there's just, there's so much of it at this point, especially with hero talents layered on. So it is a lot of stuff to change. And then when stuff changes, it can be a lot of disruption, in my case, I'm getting a new icon for Champion Spear. That's about it. I'll take it. I'm very happy with the state of Prot and with Mountain Thane. I'm really enjoying it. I think it's in a good spot. I don't really feel like I need anything right now. I never used Champion Spear in Shadowlands. I was one of the weirdos who was playing Ancient Aftershock. I just liked Night Fae better, and I thought Ancient Aftershock was really good to tank with. I'm using Champion Spear in this expansion instead, and the icon is weird. There's just so much stuff that you want to tether, there's all this stuff with all the spider themed stuff, where the little ads come out and you want to hold them in a spot or whatever. And so it's been really good, and it's been actually fun using that ability, which I kind of thought should have stayed in Shadowlands, but instead I'm enjoying it. So yeah, whatever, warrior it up for me. That's cool. Not a lot of other changes for Prot Warrior at all for the build that I'm currently using, but man, if you haven't dug into this yet, if you're like a hunter, if you are a mage, If you are a Mistweaver monk, if you're a paladin, paladins, the paladin rework is massive. If you're a rogue or a shaman, also getting a massive rework. If you main any of those classes and you haven't dug into these changes yet, like take some time, maybe during maintenance or something, like read up on the changes, read the notes for your class, and check out Icy Veins, check out the Discord, whatever, and be ready because, yeah, I mean, you touched on it at kind of the top of this segment. I really do get the impression that this is stuff that just couldn't make the cut for War Within shipping, because these are just massive reworks to some of these specs or entire classes that are so early in the process, right? We're not even 2 months as we're speaking today. Tomorrow when NA maintenance happens and we get the patch, that's 2 months since early access started. That's it, So I get the impression this was stuff that they sort of knew they wanted to address, and the changes were percolating for a while, but it just wasn't going to make it for August. And so they knew it was going to have to change. And so here we are. And yeah, it's going to be a bit disruptive. I think across most teams are going to have at least some spec or class that is impacted by this. And those players are going to have to be able to adjust. I mean, hopefully the end result is that everybody is feeling better, feeling maybe more flexible, or has some cool new options to use, feeling stronger in combat. But it is going to be some disruption and some learning. So that's kind of the give and take with, when they make these kind of sweeping class and spec changes.
Yeah.
The one thing I guess I want to point out is that the good thing about when they make these huge changes is because of the way they have these systems structured these days, you have your class spec and hero talent trees. You don't have artifact power, and you don't have artifact traits on a bespoke piece of gear, and you don't have an anima cost to redo your soul bind or whatever. There's really not much of a burden on the player here in terms of systems. You log in, you check your build, you build what you want to build, and then you go play it. So the flexibility does let them make these sweeping changes without being like, okay, well, now I got to go farm 400,000 artifact power or anima before I can play the spec now. That was it. That kind of locked them into.
I did like that.
Like those systems back then locked them into like, okay, we know this is bad, but if we change it too dramatically, the burden on the player is going to be so high that nobody's going to want to do that. Now they can make these sweeping changes. You adjust some stuff in a UI element, and then you go practice with your new build.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. You mentioned Paladins in there, and I was chatting with Mistledine about this. Corey, he's a good dude, friend of the show, and he was really excited for Imperial Ward, which is a talent coming in for Paladins, where Lay on Hands now grants the target 100% increased armor for 30 seconds and ignores healing reduction effects. So, there's some pretty cool talents coming in. I can very much easily see Lay on Hands becoming part of the pull rotation for prop Paladins, where they lay on hands themselves and have 100% increased armor for 30 seconds, because that's just ridiculous as a buff.
It's really cool too. It's so cool. That's so thematically cool too. Yeah. That's a neat. It's a little weird, but you figure you're probably not going to need that lay on hands early on, especially if you're getting that much armor off the bat. That's just so Paladin feeling, I think.
It is. There's some very neat changes coming in. There are certainly some concerns from classes as to whether or not this is going to be enough for them or not, but I will say Restoration Druids, if you enjoy the current rotation that exists for Restoration, you're still going to be doing it, because it seems like Blizzard is continuing to just tie everything they possibly can to Swiftmend. So this one spell, Swiftmend, is responsible for 6 other effects that take place based off of your hero talents and whatnot that's in there. If you search for Swiftmend inside of your tree, you will see it linked to 6 or 7 different things are all based off of Swiftmend. And that for some reason it's also tied into our set bonuses, as you'd expect for your 2 set and your 4 set are also tied into Swiftmend. So it is what your class is currently based around as a Restoration Druid. They are continuing to lean into that, so don't expect that to change. So hopefully you enjoy Swiftmending and doing the 20-second lead up into ramp and then exploding as far as healing goes, because that's currently what Restoration is looking like it's staying like. I personally am not a huge fan of this rotation. I don't like having such a massive lead in order to optimize my healing. I would prefer it if there are ways to get that ramp time reduced And I think it would be a lot more fun if they could get that ramp time reduced. So I don't know what they're planning on doing going forward. But yes, if you're enjoying the current state of Restoration Druid, you will be getting stronger, but not changing your rotation very much. So congratulations if that's something you're currently enjoying. All right, as far as raids and dungeons go in this patch, we are seeing Battle for Azeroth and Shadowland raid encounters have had their mechanics adjusted so that they are now possible to solo or complete in a small party. So you can actually go back and farm your Battle for Azeroth and Shadowlands raid encounters if that's something you're looking to do. The dungeons, the time walking dungeons, I already mentioned the scaling changes happening with those, but non-end of dungeon bosses are now also going to drop time warp badges, with the end of dungeon bosses dropping 20 of them and the other bosses dropping 10. So you're going to be able to get some more rewards for time warp badges, which is good. And same thing with raid bosses inside those time walking raids. We're going to see 20 off of the bosses, and then the end one's going to drop 50 for people to be able to earn some more badges through that way. The other big thing coming in is non-cosmetic class-restricted gear can now have its appearance collected by other classes. This is going to be retroactive for anything currently in your bank or inventory, so you're going to be able to get a lot of those non-class restricted gear, which is going to be really nice. So be sure to hang on to all your transmogs you currently have, as well as when quests are completed, all appearances from non-cosmetic item rewards will now be granted, regardless of the particular class can choose or see them or not. And this should also be applied retroactively to all previously completed quests. This means if there was a quest where you could choose between an axe, which you can't use at all because you're currently playing a druid, or a staff, and so you obviously chose the staff and got the transmog for that, you will now get the axe transmog just for logging in because you completed that quest. So that is great. There's going to be I imagine I will have a streaming list of transmog appearing as I log into the game for the first time, and all the quests catch up that I've done over the years with all of my lore masters.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of the show, K-Slock, about this a little bit this week. This particular note in the patch notes, because man, some of us have some really old accounts, and we've completed a lot of quests. So is there going to be chat spam for every appearance you've unlocked? Yeah. I don't feel like I need that, I guess, because it's going to be unintelligible, but it'll be pretty funny. That might be a lot of jank in the client there when it's all pushing down to you, if that's the case. But this is the patch that really opens up the Mog farming kind of thing, really starts realizing the potential of the warband system with it, because any quest that you have completed, you now have unlocked whatever the appearances would have granted at all from the whole, from the quest across whatever. So that's now opened up across any characters on your warband. You can now collect like you mentioned, you can collect the the class restricted gear. This especially comes into play for tier 1 and tier 2 raids, because there weren't tokens. It was just shaman gear or whatever. Yeah. And BFA and Shadowlands, you can go march through there probably solo and get that stuff. I'm looking forward to that because I never finished the Triceratops, dino bone armor from Mythic to Lore. So man. I want to put that on the list for my ever-growing list of stuff to do in live WoW right now. But really awesome changes. I'm sitting on some stuff in my bags from BWL that I had on my paladins, my several paladins, as I was trying to finish up old school Judgment before new Judgment came in. So just got to log in and get credit for those. That'll unlock a whole bunch of stuff for my other classes. This is going to be great for farming tier 1 and tier 2 appearances. If you don't have those from back when on every class, man, just go do some Molten Core, do some Blackwing Lair, whatever. Everything you pick up is going to be added to your collection. That's awesome. It's going to be so cool for doing that. And like we said, tier 2 is just iconic. Wow, it's like you just think of those sets when you think of a class in WoW, and this will make it so much easier to complete those sets, which is cool since it dovetails with the anniversary event coming in and getting the new versions of tier 2. If you're missing the old ones, it's easier to get them, and you can get the new ones alongside of it.
Yeah, exactly. They're also adding in Mistweaver I in the Timeless Isles. Now offers Mists of Pandaria Remix achievement rewards for players who didn't receive the achievement rewards properly during the event, to make sure folks can get the stuff that they'd earned, to make sure that actually came back correctly for them. In Arachnophobia mode, mounts will now dynamically swap if the mode is enabled. while the mount is already visible. So if you're turning it on and off, you don't have to get on and off your mount for it to change what it looks like. The Blood Swarmers are now supported by Arachnophobia mode, including mount versions. So those Blood Swarmer mounts will now shift, as well as they fixed a couple of glitches there with disabling upon logging in and teleporting to a new area, and that mode turning off and on when that stuff sort of happened. And so good thing they were solving some of that. As far as the character select screen goes, the warband list on the character select screen will remain collapsed or expanded from session to session. The search field for the character list now supports searching by realm name and specialization name. New characters that are created are now placed into a campfire scene if there is room, and directly under the scene in the list if they are not. So it's easier to find those new characters that you've just created. Various character select screen icons have been updated, including the character has mail, character locked, and character transfer in progress icons have been updated. A button to toggle the visibility of the interface has been added to the back button. Once the interface has been hidden, it can be brought back by double-clicking on the screen to access the visibility toggle, pressing Escape or Alt-Z. So that means if you want to take some fun screenshots around your campfire without having all the UI there, you can. And errors that display when attempting to restore a deleted character will now give more detail on what problem occurred. Man, big changes to the character select screen. Super excited about these as well. Glad to see them.
I love that you can search by realm name.
Yeah.
As stupid as that maybe sounds, like it's such a minor thing, but like I was trying to do this and I couldn't. And I'm like, how is realm name not like a thing that you can search in this field? And so here it's coming in. So this is great. Cause I have a whole bunch of characters on a realm that like my main isn't on anymore. I only ever moved one character over to Stormrage when we moved everything over last summer. So, being able to just pull up like, okay, here's all my characters from Baelgun, whatever, that sort of makes it more like the old screen used to be in terms of, it's just more usable that way in a situation like mine where I have like 15 characters on this realm and I want to switch between them because I'm doing something, I'm going through professions or I'm doing something in particular. It's just going to make that so much easier. Being able to sort by spec is pretty cool too. I think if there's like a character you always keep in a certain spec, or you want to, switch between characters of that spec, like the more stuff they could pivot that search off of, the better, especially as we just keep making more and more characters and leveling them up. But yeah, it's early days. It's only the second patch with a warband, character select screen. So, there's all kinds of opportunities to keep tacking stuff on. And we know that the UI UX team has been doing a lot of that since 10.0. So really cool changes. And I'm really glad about being able to just search for realm and also new character right under the scene, because sometimes I make a new character, then I can't find them. Right, like they get buried in that list of tunes, so it should be easier to find that new character when you make your new Drakthir warrior, then you'll be able to find it in the list easier.
Yeah. The one thing that isn't there that was broken, and I'm sad was broken, is that item restoration is still really jank in World of Warcraft. The outside page just wasn't loading. There was a couple items that I know I was looking at restoring, Rob was looking at restoring. For both of us, it was literally just not populating the spreadsheet for you to actually pick out items. It just would hang and then not actually work. And through some Google searches and whatnot, it seems like it's a very known and common problem. So they need to fix their item restoration at some point soon. That'd be good. So that's something that I think they could update and work on and get fixed as far as that stuff goes. Warband Bank, they made it so you can deposit all Warbound items, will now deposit refundable items as well as the confirmation that displays when cleaning up the Warbank can now be marked as don't show this again. The reagents stored in the Warbank can now be used to fill all types of crafting orders, and an interact icon has been added for objects that open the Warband Bank. So the crafting part of this is massive, because I've had to do a lot of putting stuff into my Warbank, going to a character, taking it out of my Warbank, and then going to do a crafting order, which is just feels like a whole extra step versus just dumping all of my crafting materials in my Warbank, which I did at one point, being like, oh, well, this is just great. I can just dump everything into my Warbank and just craft whatever I want on my characters. This is easy. And then I was like, oh, but it doesn't show up for crafting orders. So whenever I want to do a crafting order, I have to go to my Warbank and take stuff out of it. and put it into my reagent tab or carry it on my character and then go over and do the crafting order, which just felt like extra steps, which was a lot of work. And I'm glad that they're getting rid of that. So
yeah, I was doing all kinds of weird stuff between my reagent banks and my warband bank. And okay, this tune is my blacksmith and this tune is my alchemist. And then there's the blue mats that sometimes they're for more than one. Yeah, like, okay, did this guy collect it? If so, I'll keep it on him because I might need it for a thing. Or is this guy collected it, but it's not a thing that they can actually do anything with? Okay, it goes in the warband bank. Yeah. Now everything can just go in there. Yeah. And it's going to be great. Like, I'm only really doing like blacksmithing and a little bit of alchemy for crafting professions, and cooking too, I guess. But it's not like I'm doing all of them that are on the table right now, but being able to just dump everything into one pool of mats and then every tune pulls from it, like that is the dream of the warband, right? Yes. So and now it's going to work like that, which is massive. And I know like a couple of my guildies who are like way more deep in a couple professions than I am are, they're just counting the minutes at this point until this change comes in, so they can just use the war bank. It's awesome. There must be some reason why like they couldn't lock this down to like ship it this way when War Within came out, right? Because like you'd have to think that this was a priority. I mean, they were changing it within 2 months, which is awesome, but this seems like such a core part of the warband bank experience along with the crafting system. So I'm glad they didn't make us wait too long until they got it, into the game. Yeah. I'm glad too. All right. A drop-down panel has been added to the currency pane that allows you to see all transferable currencies across your warband. This enables you to transfer currencies to a character who hasn't encountered the currencies before and wouldn't see it in their normal list. So that's the solution we talked about at the top of the show that is coming in tomorrow. The currency transfer pane now has a button that allows you to quickly input the maximum amount of currency for a given character, if that's something you want to transfer. The following cursor and interact icons have been updated for the crosshairs, direction, innkeeper, repair, speak, stable master, transmogrify, and vehicle icons have all been updated in your UI. So that's going to be something fun for you to check out as well. Various map icons have been adjusted to be better visible for Flight Master, Teleporter, Meta Quests, Repeatable Quests, and Lore Objects. Those all got updated. The quest indicator for Meta and Repeatable Quests has been updated for more clarity, as well as learned curios can now be linked to chat from the curio slot or selection list for folks doing delves wanting to link their curios that they're using on Bran. The accounts that fall under the age-appropriate designation code, the AADC, will now have the block guild invites setting turned on by default. So if you have younger kids or whatnot that are playing the game, they will, as long as they have that age designation code turned on, the ADC turned on the account, it will block guild invites automatically when characters are created. So you'll need to toggle that off if you want to invite someone to a guild. When logged in on a character, the add-on list dropdown will now default to that character as opposed to all. So if you're trying to adjust a character's stuff, that will be the default as opposed to adjusting all as far as which add-ons are turned on, which makes me very happy because that's something that I've wanted for years because I keep forgetting and then only adjusting something on all of my account and I end up messing up add-ons on a different character. A column for starting matchmaking value has been added to the scoreboard for Rated Battleground Blitz. Information about that change in matchmaking has also been added to the rating tooltip. And the progress tooltips for Raid Row of the Great Vault has been added. That's great. Can we get one for world events too, please? I'm glad that they added some tooltip information for the Raid Row to let people know where their contributions have come from. I want one for the world events. If they're probably already working on it as we speak, but that's something else we want as well. Overall, these are all great changes. I'm glad to see this stuff coming in. This is what excites me about a .5 patch is often the quality of life that we get. So I'm glad to see these coming in. Yeah, I mean, this is for like a .5. This is a massive amount of stuff. I feel like, to the class changes, reworks, etc., all that, the kind of necessary updates to the young warband system, like all of that would be a pretty big patch by itself. Then you have this entire 20th anniversary event that is well beyond the realm of anything I expected that they would do for an anniversary. It's a lot, man, and it's a lot to kind of process and kind of think about how am I going to fit all of this stuff into my gaming schedule, really. But it's a good problem to have, I guess, and until it's not, right? Like it's a good thing to have a lot of stuff to do. The downside comes when you feel like you can't accomplish what you want. So we'll see if that ends up being a problem. But I think number one thing I would say for this week for jumping into the game is read your class patch notes before maintenance is over. Okay. Have an idea of what you're going to be doing, and maybe look at your class Discord, look at your Icy Veins guides or whatever, and get your builds ready to go. And then go hang out in Caverns of Time. Don't forget there's a portal from the portal room in the capital cities to get out there, and just check out everything that the 20th has to offer. That's the hub for all of it, really. So hop in there and do that. And then, don't forget on Friday, Hallow's End starts up. So start doing the lap and see what's on offer and what you want to focus on for that. It's going to be a lot. There's sort of an overwhelming amount of stuff kicking off in the game this week. But, I think step one is just prioritizing your character, your build, and being, ready to actually play it. And then, it's up to you what is more important. I mean, a lot of this stuff is just cosmetics, right? There's nothing from 20th or Hallow's End that's going to make your character stronger or going to help you with prog. It's just the traditional stuff you're going to be doing for that, if that's where you want to spend your time. If you want the cosmetic stuff, then try to map out like, okay, what do I want to focus on, and direct your time into that. And I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but I feel like if it's a coin flip, go Hallow's End and focus more on that this week, because it's only going to be here for 2 weeks, and we'll have anniversary until early January. So, try to use your time wisely in that case is what I would say. But man, it is going to be a loaded and ridiculous week. Hopefully we can actually get some time in on Tuesday in NA, and we don't have maintenance super late. Hopefully the live ops team can hang in there. They've had it rough the last couple months, but man, it's like, for not a new expansion coming out or anything, this is like one of the biggest weeks I can ever remember in terms of stuff to get out and go do.
It's certainly a very large amount of content that we're going to be having to experience over the next chunk of time, and I think that's going to be a great thing that people are going to really enjoy doing. I have a little feature request that I wanted to be sure I got in here while we were chatting about Warband and Warband stuff, and changes coming in with that. Crafting orders. I would like to be able to place Warband crafting orders, please. Or something along being able to set personal orders across servers would be nice for the Warband system. It's really weird and awkward right now. I've literally had moments where I've taken my character, moved which guild they are in to another guild so that I could place or complete crafting orders with people on that guild who are on different realms than my character is. It is very awkward that I can be like, yeah, I can place a crafting order as long as all of my characters are inside the same guild, and complete it as a guild order on any of my characters. Or I can do that for anyone who's in that guild who wants to place a crafting order. I can be like, yeah, sure, I can do that on my mage who's on a totally different realm. I can do that as long as it's a guild order. As soon as I try to do a personal order, you can't. And there's no such thing as a warband order. So you can't place orders for yourself if you are like, hey, I want to, make a cloak, and my tailor's someone who I've leveled who's a really good tailor, and I just want to be sure I'm getting the cloak that I want, so I'm going to do it for myself with my tailor. You can't do that either. So I'd like them to have a look at the crafting system and how that works, and get things adjusted a little bit so that we're able to do either cross-realm would be really nice, or be able to do warband-based orders would be also very nice for things like that.
Yeah, I feel like that's we're fixing a lot of stuff with the transmog collection and the crafting reagents. I think that's kind of the last piece, is either like cross-realm personal orders, or just removing realm restrictions on crafting orders at all. I don't know if we can get there anytime soon, but I think there's an element of it that's kind of glaring. It is sort of a glaring omission in the system at this point. So hopefully it's on the list of stuff to get fixed. I mean, I'm sure it's a big tech lift. That's a lot of data going in a lot of different places. So I think there's a reason why it's not in the game right now, I guess is what I'm saying. But it does feel like a missing piece of the puzzle right now. especially because you have the freedom to your character can be on any server and play with whoever you want in your region and all that, and there's all these other things that go across these boundaries. So the things that kind of bump up against them feel a little incongruous right now.
Yeah. All right, with that, folks, we're going to wrap up this massive episode of TSZ. I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. And today I'm giving a special shout out to Alianas, Arajian, Bradley, Dustin, James, Kapawi, Max, Shorel, and Rager. Thank you so much for all that you give, as well as all of our patrons past and present who are supporting the show and have supported the show to keep the archives online and keep our show running and everyone able to listen to it on a weekly basis and keep us on schedule and all those fun things. You can find our Patreon over at patreon.com/thestartingzone, or you can go to thestartingzone.com and click on the patron link that's there. Thank you to our newest patron, BBC. Thank you so much for hopping in and supporting. We will be sure that you get you added into the Discord and whatnot if you want to, and be asking questions there and trying to find out stuff there. I will say, if you're someone who's trying to catch up, we got an email recently about jargon on the show and trying to be I don't quite understand everything that people are saying around World of Warcraft, what's happening with it. Our Discord's a great outlet for that. If you're hey, someone used this thing and I don't know what it means as far as this acronym goes, or whatever it was. We do our best to try and describe the stuff that we're talking about on the show. Sometimes we do a better job than others. But if you're ever curious, you can always hop into our Discord and ask there. And there's plenty of folks who are more than happy to help out with questions like that. So be sure that you're taking advantage of the Discord when you can. And thank you so much to all our patrons again for supporting the show.
Absolutely, yes, and welcome aboard, BB. Thanks for hopping in and supporting the show. And yeah, we couldn't do it without all of you, so thank you so much. And if you ever downloaded an old episode or something, thank a patron, because that stuff is all online because of them. So thank you all. You keep us going, keep the show on schedule and in production, and we really appreciate it. So thank you, and enjoy the 20th anniversary patch. And if you haven't, get your entries in for your Wave Whisker mount. You still got time to get in there. Send us your mogs, and we'll get those sent out. And just in a little while here, we're down to the wire, but there's still time.
Yep. If you folks enjoyed this episode, another great way you can support it is going over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts, and leave us those 5-star reviews. They really help out our show. They help more people find the show, boost us up those ratings and rankings. And this one comes in from Drimmy out of the USA, entitled "Holy Schmoly." As someone who's been ramping back into the love of the game since Dragonflight, I was looking for content to consume, and I stumbled in here. I fell in love with the way they analyzed the important items of the week that I immediately subscribed and became a patron. I can't wait to do all the things I would have missed or forgotten without them. Well, thank you so much for hopping in, Jeremy, and as well for the patron contribution. That is awesome. I'm glad that we are helpful and part of your regular rotation of listening. And we're going to keep making episodes as long as you keep listening to them. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time to write in. Helps us out. It means a lot. And great to hear from you. I'm really glad you're enjoying the show. And, it's been a bit of a weird transition for us here going into War Within, because, man, as you probably get the impression from top of show, sometimes we don't really have the whole lay of the land yet. They've thrown some curveballs at us this time, and it's fun. I think it keeps the game feeling fresh on a weekly basis. But normally we can kind of sit here and sort of confidently say, okay, this is what's going on this week. Check off boxes, X, Y, and Z. And the first couple of months here, it's been a bit more like, well, we think it's going to be something like this, but make sure you go in and check. And these are the things it might be. And if it's this, then maybe approach it this way. It's a different thing than maybe we've had in the past so far. But I think we're gonna, we'll settle in at some point. But it's been pretty fun, I think, out of the gate with War Within. It's just you don't really know what's gonna be there for you on Tuesday reset login.
But we'll be able to tell you exactly where to go to find out, and that's the important part. All right, that's gonna wrap up episode 654 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com, or reach out to us on Twitter at thestartingzone or thestartingzone.com/Discord, or we now have a Blue Sky account for The Starting Zone. You can go onto Blue Sky and search for The Starting Zone. You can find it there. It's just thestartingzone.bluesky.com as far as joining that. And if you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, you can find that over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/the starting zone. And check out all the designs on shirts and mugs and stickers and that kind of fun stuff. If you're trying to find Jason, where can they find you on the internet?
Best place to find me is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald, and you can also find me on Blue Sky over at Jay Lucas. Big exodus over to Blue Sky from WoW Twitter this past week. I've been over there for a while, but not posting much. But it's starting to pick up a bit now. I think people are getting sick of some of the policy changes over on Twitter. So we're seeing more WoW players specifically really starting to move over. You can also find me streaming WoW over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald and youtube.com/Shieldwald. I will be streaming this week, at least Tuesday, Wednesday, Sunday, probably for raids and keystones. Probably just on Twitch because we'll have the drops going. I don't really want anybody like watching the YouTube stream and not getting credit towards their pet drop. So we might just keep it on Twitch this week. So come check out the video channels and say hi over there.
If you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey, or over on Blue Sky at SpencerHD, or on twitch.tv/SpencerHD, or youtube.com/@SpencerHD. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening and jobs done.